Hear that? That's the sound of my cockroach wheels spinning. This episode is brought to you by Cockroach Wheels, the original skateboard wheel company in Australia. They've been doing it since the 80s and they're still going strong. I'm currently riding the Jackson Pills Pro models, 54mm. So go to cockroachwheels.com. They ship worldwide. Thank you, Cockroach. Ew.
It's almost time. 7, 6, 5.
Tried to hold us back, to hold us, tried to hold us back.
We will be here forever. Do you understand?
Hey, it's Shan here. This week I catch up with Errol, Adrian Errol Jones. Adrian even gives us a bit of a story as to how the nickname Errol came about, so you'll have to tune in for that. However, we go into a deep dive of 50 years of Australian skateboarding for Adrian. He may have been one of the first ever Australian professional skateboarders, and he's still doing it 50 plus years later. It's amazing. Ty Colling sits in as co-host this week. So between the two of those guys, wow, there's a lot of history to unravel, and we do that. We unpack it, and we get lots of video footage and photos up this episode, lots of visuals. So it's definitely worth your time and energy to watch the video production over at the Terrible Happy Talks YouTube channel. But otherwise, you can sit back, relax, and listen to us talk about the stuff that we're watching. I think we've got some archival footage of places like Hulley's Ramp, Ryde Bowl, and I don't know if it's ever been seen before publicly, but I know it's pretty rare footage, so it's worth checking out. And we have epic photos supplied by Dave Mock, Dave Pang, and this week's featured artist of the week is Marty Baptist, also founder of the brand Japan National. So we've got Marty's images playing in the background on the video production episode, and I love Marty's art. If you haven't seen it, I love Marty too. And also Cockroach Wheels. I know I've done an ad for them at the moment, but I still just want to give them a shout out. Like Luke over at Cockroach has been so supportive of the podcast, and he's kindly sponsored this episode, which makes a lot of sense because, Adrian was sponsored by Cockroach back in the day. Maybe still is. I don't know. They're probably flowing in product because that guy deserves every single thing he gets, man. He's a kind soul as well. I mean, just a legend, but just such a, enriched human. And it was an honour and a privilege. So sit back, relax, and get to know Mr. Adrian Jones, everyone. Cheers.
Child of the crayon, child of the light, stars of the neon belong to a culture destined to rock for eons. Time doesn't exist, shut those cataracts, capture the virtualist. Now, let's get back to what makes things seem forever, whether it's unseen, unheard, or it's 16 again. Not a bother, fill this old man with a killer flow that gives all.
Man, I'm going to hit you hard with the hard question straight away. Where did the name Errol come from?
Errol. Adrian Errol Jones.
I knew it.
A nickname that my sponsor gave me back when I was writing for Skateboard World. And, then around about 1980, when Australian Crawler had a certain song out, Oh, Errol, I would give anything, the rest of it. A lot of my mates at Manly Skate City, that was the time that song came out, the era. They would, I'd be riding in the half pipe, and they'd be sitting up there in the stands or waiting in the vestibule for their go, and they'd all be singing the song. Oh, Errol.
But then the next part goes. Yeah. I would give anything just to be like him.
That was it. Yeah. So it came from a stir.
A stir or respect?
Bit of both. Bit of both, I'd like to think. Yeah. I hope.
So what's your first memory of AJ skateboarding? Can you remember?
To be fair, I never saw Adrian skate for like a long time, since having first seen his pro model at Skateboard World basically, him and Biff's, as amongst many other skateboards as well. But those boards seem to jump off the shelf and resonate. The germ-free and the Biff model with quite iconic imagery, which Biff's would probably be controversial now. But yeah, that was my first introduction, I guess, to Adrian and Biff. And then I couldn't say when I actually would have seen you skate for the first time, because I know you used to skate around a lot from hindsight, but I don't recall ever having seen you at Curl Park or anything in my sort of earlier years. I remember having sessions with Biff sort of in the 90s at Monavale, but I think maybe the first time I'd seen you, I don't know, I can't even remember. Yeah. Can you remember seeing me?
I do remember clearly the first time I saw you, Ty, was at this rather large half pipe in the back of a youth centre in Waverley in Bondi Junction.
Oh, you came there, wow.
Bondi Junction.
I remember you talking about that.
I went there with Dave Mock one day for a session, and you were there was this tiny little blonde kid doing rock to fakies on this enormous half pipe, and I couldn't do rock to fakies at that stage. I thought, wow, this kid's hot. And that was my first.
Yeah,
I'm not
right.
sure if we spoke or whatever on that day, but certainly I remember clearly seeing you there. And
wow, classic.
I think Dave and I had a bit of a short session on the ramp.
Yeah,
we were just dropping by. I think we might have been delivering boards to someone.
Sure.
In the neighbourhood, but so I can't remember what year that would have been. 89 or something.
88, 89.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure. Yeah, wild. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it would have been years, and then I definitely, what Maroubra was done, and think of those old school jams that Fox started to put together when bowls sort of started to come about a bit more, and then that's when I first started seeing you sort of more regularly.
That would
out
be
amongst
right
it.
Too. That's right. I was living in the eastern suburbs in those days too, so we would have been bumping into each other at all those skate parks and what have you. Yeah. So yeah.
Man, the history's deep. I love it. Now, today, AJ, I really do want to go through a chronology of your amazing life, and I know there's a lot of people who are really keen to hear it. Like I was saying to you earlier, I was skating at this, I guess, a bit of a bowl jam in Newcastle the other night, and
Chaos
bowl jam, and a few guys were like, when are you going to get AJ on, and there's a bit of hype around it. So, but what I'd like to do today is start with some recent events. So Australian Keegan Palmer has just won the Olympics, and, someone such as yourself who's so legendary in Australian skateboarding, I just want to watch the clip with you and just see what you think of it. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
No. I guess more of just to see just where skateboarding has come.
That's right, yes.
So big alley-oop, Indy over the huge hip, backside Smith. Look at that.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable.
He is
speed.
so rad.
Yeah.
He gets technical stuff in there. He goes really fast. He goes high. He's got great control. He always has had.
See, I love the frontside rock and slide.
I love the frontside rock and slide.
Oh, and the frontside lean over that pyramid. Yeah. Look at that.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
There it is.
Right to the end.
Look at that. So, did you ever in your lifetime think you'd see that combination of tricks strung together in one single run?
Oh, no, never.
Yeah.
I can remember many years ago, probably back to the 80s, Dave Mock, a good old friend of mine who was one of the better Australian freestyle skaters in those days, he was telling me, he was predicting, vert skating, Adrian, is going to go, they're going to be doing freestyle tricks on vert. And I was going, no, that'd be dull. That couldn't work, But yeah, there you go. They're doing kick flips. They do flip tricks to rails, flip tricks to disaster. The technical ability nowadays is just mind-boggling.
And I guess comparatively, if we cut to the Hang 10 image that we have here.
Yes.
So tell us the backstory behind that. I mean, you just mentioned freestyle skateboarding. I mean, Was freestyle your first introduction to skateboarding?
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
I've got my first skateboard in 74, 73, 74.
So wow,
So that's 50 years of
50 years ago.
skateboarding, yeah. So the decades add up. But yeah, in 75, after I'd had my first skateboard was a Webcraft, a GT Webcraft board from Victoria. I'd got it from a mate, swapped a table tennis bat for his old GT board that he'd grown bored with.
that sounds like an unfair swap.
Yeah. I was a competition table tennis bat. It wasn't just an old one, any old one.
Like a performance one?
Yeah. Yes. But and on that Webcraft, the GT, me and my brother just cruised the streets where we grew up, and it was all surf style, just carving, swerving down roads. But just by complete coincidence, later that year, the urethane wheels came in, and in 75, there was just boom, there was a massive craze, and it swept the country like the yo-yo crazes they used to have back in the 60s and 70s. Every kid had a skateboard. It was similar to like when the Power, the time Hawk and the Power guys came out in the mid to late 80s. 75 was just huge, and it was all based predominantly on the freestyle trick skateboarding. The nose wheelies, handstands, 360s, that sort of stuff. There were slalom events at the competitions, but the demos would be predominantly freestyle tricks and stunt tricks, barrel jumps, or the Coke team. The Coke team, who were my initial actual local skateboarding heroes in Sydney, they would line up. Chris Elliott would line up 10 sort of kids down on the ground squatting, and he'd just come hurtling down a hill or through the shopping centre and jump over them from one board to the other. So he did a high jump as well in there too, So that's what we were going for initially. We're seeing Russ Howell come out from the States doing the demos. He would do demos with the Coke team, and that was what we were all into at initially. So yeah, I got quite a few freestyle tricks wide back in the day myself.
So where was the knowledge and understanding of the skateboarding for it to come from America to Australia? What media or what was happening to alert everyone here of it even being a thing?
Well, it's basically just it was on the news. Basically, there'd be news stories. There was no skate media. For starters, obviously, but it was at every local shopping centre. There'd be posters up. The Coke team is here next weekend, or the Coke team's going to be at the Chatswood Westfield or the Rose Hill. Or the all around Sydney, the different Westfield shopping centres to do demos, judge competitions. That's and skateboarding was just everywhere on every street. It was all Bain Superflexes. Along with the advent of the urethane wheel, the fiberglass flex boards sort of were the fashion at the time. Although they weren't really the most practical. They were great for surf carving and for pumping, but for actual freestyle tricks, I observed really quickly that Russ Howell rode quite a stiff deck. So my first boards were stiff. I sort of thought that's the way to go. But the freestyle was what it was for some couple of years.
Like you said, it was quite popular. But how was it being received by the wider community? Was it compared to, say, a yo-yo fad?
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
It was.
I think everyone looked at it, that's a craze. Let's look at this in 6 months' time and it's probably fade away. And to a degree it did. It sort of lasted about 18 months in full swing. And then, it sort of quietened down. But I guess even professional yo-yo performers, when the craze is gone, they're still doing it. There was a bunch of skaters, amongst which I was one of, who kept it up after the initial craze.
I remember a yo-yo team did a demo at my school, and they turned up in a van of yo-yoers.
That'd be right,
Came and did their little yo-yo demo and bailed.
Yeah. Travelled the world doing it. Yeah, that's right. Well, we had
Do you remember that time?
Had Russ Howell and Stacey Peralta.
No. keep going.
Yeah, we had
Please do.
Russ Howell come out in the early days. He was one of the American freestyle champ at the time, ex-gymnast, multiple 360 guy.
Handstands.
Specialist, you got it, yeah. But on his second visit out to Australia, Stacey Peralta came out too as well to do demos, and he influenced a bunch of us in Australia. Stacey, along with, by that stage, early editions of Skateboarder magazine had hit the newsstands, and that's when we were introduced to Greg Weaver on the cover of the first edition riding a pool. There'd be other pool shots in the mags, bank skating, the early Dogtown articles heavily featured the local schools in LA and Venice, where they're predominantly, mimicking surfing on concrete banks.
Yeah.
And we thought that's the way to go. It looks.
So, did you ever surf yourself?
Yes.
Were you a surfer?
Yeah.
Were you a surfer first?
Yeah, probably. I was surfing from about 73, just on family holidays. Around the same time I started, but I took to skateboarding heavily because we lived in the burbs. I wasn't a local down at the beach, and so the skateboard was just, it was at reach and just out the front door. So
where were you born? What suburb were you born?
I was born in Melbourne, actually. Where was I born? I grew up in Doncaster in Melbourne, predominantly. Yeah.
Okay. And then you transitioned to Sydney from there?
When
or?
I was 10, yeah. We moved from Doncaster to North Shore of Sydney when I was 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Started making friends early.
That's right, yeah.
And how old were you exactly when you started skateboarding?
Probably 13 going on 14. I remember very, very clearly the Christmas of 73. For the first handful of years we moved to Sydney, the family would go back to Melbourne for Christmas holidays. All of our family were mostly in Melbourne. And we'd lived in this really tight-knit cul-de-sac in Doncaster where we had really close friends, and we'd go back on holiday with them. And one of my close mates had got a GT for his Christmas present, and I was borrowing it, and it was a matter of going down this little driveway he had and negotiating a 90-degree turn at the bottom to make it onto the footpath and then go down this long slope. And I just fell in love with it. It wasn't my board, but I was borrowing my mate's Christmas present. But I just fell in love with the feel and the movement and being able to guide yourself on a moving thing.
That was the first time you'd ever seen it?
Yeah, pretty much. I'd seen it in 1966 in that same cul-de-sac in Melbourne. The bloke up the road we used to have big barbecue parties for the whole neighbourhood and come and hang out, and he had a pool in his front yard. He had a sweeping driveway. And for some reason or other, I don't know why, because he had daughters, he had a handful of early 60s skateboards. And all the fathers were trying to zoom down the driveway, and none of them could really do it. They'd get 3/4 of the way down the driveway and then run it out. But we as 6-year-old kids were sitting down on our butts going down the driveway on these early skateboards. So that was the first time I'd seen skateboarding. But again, that was 66, 67 was a craze of skateboarding that died out.
Yeah.
And
what prompted the family move from Melbourne to Sydney?
That was my father's work. Yeah, he had a better opportunity in Sydney and jumped on it. And yeah, we moved up and initially hated it, I guess because we missed all our friends, and change is a big one like that. And but grew to love it. I think once we sort of we moved up to St Ives, and we lived by the bush. And once we discovered the freedom of being able to just wander down the street and roam through the bush, the fire trails, either hiking or then early on our bikes, pre-BMX era sort of thing, hitting the trails on our bikes, and also then taking it a year or so ahead further, discovering surf and skate culture, and Sydney being obviously right by the coast, grew to love Sydney once I sort of discovered that sort of lifestyle. And, yeah.
Man, it sounds like such a magical era,
Yeah.
So who did you first encounter to skate with his skate buddies, and how did that sort of play out?
Initially, it was it was my brother, my younger brother Russell. He's about 2.5 years younger than me, and he whether it was all the earlier sports we did, table tennis, and then skateboarding, a bit of skiing over the years, we always did it together. We had a bit of that, brotherly tussle here and there, but ostensibly we got on really well. And being able to having a brother you can do the stuff that you love with was a boon. So we initially got into freestyle together on the streets locally. Then started hitting up the banks together. Catching public transport around Sydney to the local hottest bank spots. But he was good too. He in '76, David Hill put on a probably the last freestyle contest of that freestyle craze era at North Rocks. It was called he called it the Skateboarding Olympics, just as a matter of interest. And my brother Russell won the actual junior. He won the junior freestyle section in that comp. Yeah, as I didn't even place in the seniors, but there's footage of that comp on YouTube, an ABC clip.
I think I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, right. Did you meet any enduring friends there
at that comp? I was the first time I'd seen Rob Wedge Francis in real life. He was one of the hottest Melbourne freestylers and skateboarders, and he was available on a poster Australia wide. You could buy in record shops. Record shops in those days would have a section in the corner where you could buy posters of your favourite bands and everything.
I remember that, yeah.
There might be a surfing one or what have you, but in the middle of the skate craze, some entrepreneur put out this beautiful colour poster of Wedge doing handstands and freestyle tricks, and so you could buy a wedge poster in every record shop across Australia.
Awesome.
So that's how we. But yeah, I first saw Wedge there. There was also other guys there who I'd known and skated with at the boat ramp, at Greenwich boat ramp. John Tesseriro, Gary Bird, Bob Hasty.
I think we've got photos of that.
A few
Can we
others.
get that up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
we'll go back to these ones. Was that it?
That's the boat ramp. Yeah, that's Greenwich
that's an
boat
older
ramp.
photo.
That's a new
more
photo.
Recent.
That's more recent. At one of we revisited the boat ramp in probably 2014-ish, and also in 2008. It was part of the old Sydney old school skate jams, and we also had a session there in memoriam for Tony Mann, who passed away a handful of years ago.
Right. So
Tony Mann was
that one there is that early boat ramp?
That's 77.
That's 77 boat ramp. That was the year I was born.
Is that right? There you go. Yeah, so that's me riding.
You were born around then too, weren't you?
I was three
years after.
Middle of 77.
It's not often I'm the youngest man at the table anyway. Let's keep going. Look at that comparison, like early boat ramp, and then what year was that roughly?
2014, I think.
2014.
Yeah.
What would you call that, right up on the wheels like that?
I put that in, those two shots in, because it's me doing the same trick. It's basically I'd come up at high speed and cop a little bit of air, like a frontside bunny hop air out the top of the bank, and you'd land it in a lip slide and come out of it in like a Burt slide.
Like a Burt. Okay.
Yeah.
Like so Bertleman, which is such a surf.
That's right, yeah.
Surf move.
So that was early. That was sort of starting to throw in early skateboarding type moves into surf skating style. Yeah. Because the boat ramp was initially all, you'd be carving it and doing Bertlemans and.
So where was the boat ramp exactly on the harbour, Sydney Harbour?
That's at Greenwich.
Greenwich.
There's a boat club right on the water at Greenwich near the baths. It's still there. I go back there occasionally, just to reflect and meditate. It's sort of breaking apart now. The concrete's as rough as guts. But
to meditate.
I find it a really peaceful spot to sit down at, because it's
not just for sentimentality.
As
well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just because because of friends that have passed that I used to skate there. Just if I was feeling low, and it's just a really beautiful spot to be. It's right on the harbour. Steep cliffs behind it. The bush has all grown around it over recent years, but I just go there occasionally and reflect. When I'm feeling a bit down.
Deep memories.
But the
Speaking of deep memories,
Sure.
Tell me about this photo. I found that one really interesting. Like, so, I mean, if that's not the most makeshift ramp you've ever seen.
Yeah.
So where was that? Give us the backstory.
That's that is the bottom of our driveway. That's in the early dodgy ramp phases. That's probably that's when they were starting to get a bit more sophisticated and larger. But we just used to get old kitchen tables and get form ply and 4x2s from all the local building sites around that area. It was a new
Classic
suburb
story.
It was a new part of St Ives they
table.
were building up, and there were building sites everywhere. You know.
So for those that are listening, can you describe like how you've actually built it up against the roof of your house, of a house?
Amazingly, that ramp doesn't have a single nail in it. That is three or four bits of long 4x2s leaning up against the gutter, the roof gutter, with the form plies all just delicately balanced up against each other. And there is a large old kitchen table, as I said, behind it in the middle to give the middle of the ramp some support. And on top of the kitchen table, there were 2 stools to give the upper piece of form ply support. So that ramp was, so we could just, dismantle that ramp at the end of the day and tuck it in behind the house so that Dad wouldn't be upset.
Was your dad supportive of your skateboarding?
Yeah. Yes, he was. Yeah,
he was.
Yeah. But he liked the house to look neat and tidy. He didn't want that sort of shit to be left down the front driveway.
How would you describe your early family dynamic with your parents and your siblings? Pretty settled.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, we had a very very supported upbringing. Coming up to Sydney, they supported us in whatever we want to do, and whether it was whatever sport we were into, they would drive us to the table tennis club that we belonged to. And then when I sort of started tennis, I was initially driven to the tennis courts that I played at each weekend, and later on I got my own push bike and I started cycling with a mate to the tennis courts. But yeah, they were really supportive of the things that we did, supportive of us at school as well, pushed us along, encouraged us, but encouraged us without pushing us too hard, so.
You think that's the key to parenting?
Yeah.
Is that something you applied to your parenting?
More or less, yeah. You just sort of encourage your kids to. I've always encouraged my kids to follow what they enjoy doing, follow their passion, but as well as that, with the schoolwork or whatever they take on, to follow it through, to give it their all, so to speak, But yeah, without wanting ever to become the sort of pushy, helicopter style parent, just to encourage them to do what they love and do their best. Yeah.
So we were talking earlier about the musical success of your daughter. I mean, as the success started to trickle in, did you feel an urge to maybe push, or was it just all support?
It was all support. There were times, where Imogen might have gotten frustrated or jack of some of the practice or what have you, but my partner in particular, and we both, with my support too, we would encourage her to remember that that she'd chosen this path and she wants to do the violin, and if she still if she thinks about it long term, does she still want to follow the path, and if her answer was yes, we'd say, well then go for it, keep it up, this is just a rough patch, or that particular teacher or at school, you might not be gelling with that particular teacher, but there are ways around it, there are ways through it, and we'd encourage her to just continue like that.
Amazing.
I think they're really good insights, I would say, as well, and now doing some more skate coaching these days myself, and I think a lot of it comes back to mindset of how you're doing things and why you're doing things and all of that. And then so to put it out there that there's going to be challenging times, but you push on through. And something I like to say and bring up is remember why you started.
That's right.
And go back to that and be like, why to start? Whatever the feeling, what feeling did that give you? And so with the kids that I'm working with, it's like just go and do some grinds or some simple airs. Just take it back to your more basic stuff and remember that feeling and that indescribable thing which nothing else can give to you similarly, and just take it back to those sorts of things and things to point out like that it's not all about fully progressing and perhaps having to be your best in any given moment, but there will be times when you'll shine and other times when you've got to persevere and push through, and create a sort of discipline, and when particularly if some kids don't per se like enjoy school, I'm like, there's one good thing you can get out of school is the discipline to stick to something, do it, be there, put in your best, and then that can just apply to the rest of your life.
Yeah, totally. It's like transferable, hey?
Yeah, totally.
Are you finding that with
totally
the skate? Sorry, AJ.
Sure.
Do you find that with the skate coaching that with the onset of more competitions and a desire for people to, achieve in that way, that kids are coming with more of a driven focus and it's less fun because they're feeling more pressure? Are they putting pressure on themselves or from their parents?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Effectively.
Thanks for being honest, Ty.
And I think a lot of that stems from, it's been mentioned so many times here and everywhere, social media, all of that. And I said it to someone today. I was like, you're looking at these social media things all the time. This is actually quite a beginner kid too. And it's like, you have all these expectations of yourself. I want to kickflip. I want to do whatever. And it's like all these people started with these simple things. They started with kick turning, basic kick turns and pushing around and getting general control of their board. But remember, the rolling thing is part of the fun of it, you know what I mean? And so, but this visualization, this uber visualization of everything being in front of you and so accessible, it creates expectations, right? And that's just a major thing to be like, I'm not good enough or whatever, because I've got to like jump all these steps. And that's another thing I try and bring a few crew who sort of intermediate back to. It's like, yeah, a kickflip's great or a McTwist is great or something, but if you learn all these basics, all of these things will come much easier. It won't feel like such a massive hurdle to get there. If you piece it all together and chip away at it, it will come together. And that's same sort of thing as what we just mentioned, more good life lesson that, you keep working at something and it will start to flow more, come more together.
Yeah, I remember I used to do skate coaching back in the 80s, the mid to late 80s, for councils around Sydney in the school holidays. And there was always an element of some of the kids in the class would be there for just child minding purposes. But they were skating. They were into skating too because it was the thing, obviously. But and half the class were really into it. But it was the era where everyone just wanted to learn how to ollie. And I could ollie quite well in those days. But in every class there was always some kids that just couldn't get it. They were beginner status and trying hard, and you can see them kicking their boards away in frustration. I used to show some of those guys some really early 70s tricks, crab walks and end overs, things like that introduced them to a whole form of different type of board control. Yeah. And they would come away stoked because they actually left the lesson learning something they hadn't seen at that point, because those sorts of things weren't being shown in the mags. Obviously, they were from 1976, but they'd learned something new. They'd learned, there's another approach to riding my board. So there's always, look for different avenues to try to keep the kid inspired.
Right.
Always.
Exactly.
Well, when you started to get a taste of your ability,
yes,
and people started to recognise, Adrian Errol Jones. Like, what was your motivation in that period of time? Was it more fame, more prestige, or was it driven by progression? What was pushing you?
It was definitely progression. The fame thing was weird. You know, that sort of, you don't realise it's happening at the time. It's just, you know, I started to get most attention, I guess, in the pinball pool era. That's when the sort of sponsors came in before pinball. I was first sponsored when Mark Lynch from Skateboard World, a big shop at Burwood back in the 70s, one of Sydney's biggest retailers.
The Skateboard World vert ramp, portable ramp.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
I got knocked out cold on that when I was 12. Anyway, let's keep going.
Is that right?
Yeah. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so Skateboard World were an institution in Sydney skateboarding for decades, and Mark's first saw me at the Greenwich boat ramp and sponsored me there. But in the pinball pool era, I started to get attention there because
Why exactly?
yeah, I guess Wedge and I, my good friend Wedge Francis from Melbourne, he just moved up from Melbourne to Sydney,
Okay.
and we were just ahead of the pack at pinball pool.
So had you been getting images or news from California about the Dogtown and Z-Boys skating pools?
Yeah.
And that was what put you on a search for pools? Or were you already just searching it out?
That's an interesting story too. Growing up where I did, Pymble is the next suburb to where I lived.
Is that one of the pictures from Pymble Pool?
Correct? Yeah.
Wow.
That was a poster.
The glasses time.
It's so good.
So gangster.
See, that's mimicking Tony Alva, the Mirrored Sunnies. So
Yeah.
we did all that sort of thing, of course, mimicking our heroes. But
go back to this. Yeah, sorry, go back to what you were saying.
the Pymble was the next suburb, and the Pymble Pool Centre was an old Frank O'Neill Pools display centre and retail shop, and it was across the road from an indoor swimming centre where all the local schools would go for swimming lessons in winter, and so we knew about the existence of this pool centre across the road. But because we were local, we also knew, I think we were there with the family, there was a gardening supply shop down the road. We noticed that it had gone broke, it was closed. And so having seen pool skating in the early skateboarder magazines, my brother and I and some neighbourhood friends sort of made the trek down to Pymble Pool and had a little look behind the fences, and initially found there were 2 rideable pools there. That earlier photo that you flicked up before, the blue coloured pool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That one there? Yeah, that's
with no shoes on.
That would have been 76. Wow. Christmas holidays of 75, 76. That's at the time when we first discovered it, and that was still during the craze. That's on a borrowed board. Yeah, I was still riding in bare feet in those days. Yeah, they were urethane.
Urethane was that?
Early urethane days.
How old were you roughly?
I was
in that picture?
15.
15.
Yeah.
Look at that.
So, yeah, we emptied the top pool. The top pool, that one was about 7 foot deep. It had pretty good curves for an Australian pool. And as you can see, it was pretty carvable. And there was a bigger pool down the bottom, but it was like 3/4 full of dark green sludge, and to
too much
15-year-olds. I mean, the other kids with me were my younger brother, who was 13, 12 and a half, and the other kids. So we're all quite young, and it was just overwhelming. So we just stuck to that pool for a bit.
Amazing.
But yeah, then when Wedge first moved to Sydney, would have been 78, mid 78. I bumped into and first actually met Wedge Francis at the Greenwich boat ramp, where we were still going to, my brother and I, on weekends pretty regularly. And there was Wedge, just Russell and I, and Wedge rocked up, and we sort of skated a session together, introduced ourselves, and Wedge told us he was staying with his sister. He just moved up, or a relative in the Pymble area. And I said, oh, yeah, we used to skate a pool in Pymble. And it was we're being a bit opportunistic. We were able to get a lift back towards home with Wedge in his car, and I said, I'll show you the pool if we can get a lift with you. And we got to Pymble Pool, and I expected it to be just, we hadn't been there for a while, full of water and crap, and was keen to show Wedge the top pool that we'd skated. And when we rocked up, the big pool at the bottom, there was a bunch of guys down there, and they were just literally finishing the last, emptying the big bowl with buckets. And they were getting the towels out to dry it down. And Wedge and I rocked up, and it turned out to be Bob Hasty and some of his friends. And they were some of the 75 hot freestylers from the Sydney scene. Yeah, and Wedge knew Bob. And Bob sort of said, "G'day, Wedge, Adrian, what are you guys doing here right now, as we've just finishing up bailing the pool." And that was, so we sort of stumbled upon that a pool session in the big pool. It was the first time I'd ever skated the big 8'6" pool down the bottom.
Yeah.
It was the first time Wedge had ever seen it. And literally from that day onwards, that was the beginning of the so-called Pymble Pool scene.
Ah, okay.
So that was became
a
known.
Significant day.
That was a significant day, yeah, because from then on, the big pool at Pymble remained pretty much empty all the time for the next 2 years. If there was rain, you'd have to rock up and bail it out yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was, although, yeah, it's got other history to it. There were other skaters, that's my history of Pymble. There were other skaters, other local skaters that I've since learnt who were skating Pymble at the same time as us, at the top pool, the little pool, and earlier than my brother and I too. They got into
thing like unheard of.
Yeah, local guys from Turramurra High.
Right.
A mutual mate of mine knew them. My friend, the guy I speak of, Cameron, he ended up going to Turramurra High, but I only found out about these guys recently in researching a book project that we spoke of earlier.
Tell us about it. You got it here. Is that the one, the vertical axis? How'd that come about? That's so epic.
The book there. The vertical axis.
Is that in shot? Yeah, there it is.
Can you see that?
There.
Yeah.
So who put that together?
That's John McGrath predominantly. It was started by Noel Forsyth, a skater from Melbourne of my generation. He started on the project, but John took over from Noel and made it a real sort of labour of love. And he was working on it for, 3 to 5 years, just on and off. And what he did was contacted about 20 odd of the people that used to skate Pymble through the generation, through the eras, and asked them to just contribute a short piece on their reflections of Pymble Pool and what it meant to them. And he sort of asked all of those skaters and the wider circle of skaters who might have been there, can you share your photo collections with us? From that just put this just fantastic book together. It's been really, really well received. But yeah, it's a great document because, in a sense, there are other scenes in other cities and states around Australia, but this one, Pymble, became widely known because it copped media attention in the day.
Mainstream media.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
Well, mainstream surfing media.
Right, like Trax Mag?
Trax Magazine, Surfing World Magazine in the day. A film crew came down to shoot Pymble Pool at one stage from Current Affair or something like that.
Amazing.
So because it got that attention, skaters travelled to Pymble Pool from Melbourne, from Canberra, the FOD guys from Canberra, Far Out Design. There was a crew from Canberra who came up regularly. Guys travelled from, into Brisbane, Gold Coast. Skaters that I'd met in New Zealand when I went over there with Wedge in 78, 79. When they came to Sydney, they came to Pymble Pool and sessioned it with us. So, yeah, it became a real focal point of early vert skating in Australia.
Ty and I, you go, Ty. Okay.
And then I was just going to say on that, as far as it being mainstream, it actually was in that Chiquito ad that you were in.
That's right. Exactly.
Which is, that's pretty interesting for a defunct business spot to actually show up in a commercial advertisement.
That's right, yeah.
Quite interesting scenario. So
yeah.
How did that sort of come about? Why did they want to shoot there, or how did that eventuate?
I suspect it probably came from the influence of, I think I touched on John Tesoriero earlier on, one of the early Sydney bank pioneers and vert pioneer skaters. His brother worked for a promotions or advertising company. I know he got us the roles in that commercial, and so perhaps he was giving ideas to the team, putting the ad together, because that was a really quiet time in skateboarding. That was certainly after the death of the big 75 skateboard craze, and before any skate parks were built. Those late 70s skate parks were built. So putting skateboarding in the ad, combined with surfing, there's a bit of surfing in the ad as well, obviously you can see. Was a bit out there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Did they get permission to film there? Just come in and film? Was it that sort of open sort of space,
that sort
basically?
Of open space. Pinball Pool had a really weird history, actually. There were times when you'd get kicked out. Cops did come to the pool at various stages, but it was kind of dormant or empty for some of the era. But then it was sold to, I think, Mutual Pools for a while, and Mutual Pool, whoever owned it for a while there, they opened up the retail shop up the top without kicking us out from skating the pools out the back. It was a really large property. There was in all about 4 or 5 pools, and it was a big terraced sort of space out the back with overgrown palm trees. In its heyday, it would have looked beautiful. But in 1979, 1980, it was all overgrown and rubble out the back with empty pools. But the actual retail shop up the top was still a presentable building. So there was a time there where they were selling pool chemicals up the top, and there were pool sessions happening out the back.
That's classic. Wow.
So I think when the ad team came, it was that latter stage, when it was cool to just walk in anytime you want. So
wow, that's cool.
So I do remember when we were talking to John Gray about when he was skating the ditch in Quakers Hill, and he did his first kick turn, and he described it as like him and his friends had never seen a kick turn. They're like, we invented this trick,
We just went up and then came back down instead.
I mean, were you having those moments regularly at Pinball Pool of like, did we just invent that?
Well, that's exactly right. Yeah,
right.
It'd be the first who'd be the first to get a frontside grind in that particular line of the pool, but it was also the area where as old mate Biff once eloquently described it, where skateboarding was really transitioning from being surf-based or surf-influenced sort of sport into its own sort of paradigm. The introduction of tricks like, just dropping in. I mean, it's unthinkable nowadays, but just even doing what we used to call an elevator drop was a trick. And Skateboarding magazine featured a sequence of someone doing an elevator drop, which is
just like
dropping in, a drop in.
Just a drop in?
Yeah, well, a kick in.
Not just like I'm thinking of an acid drop, just to flat. But
you do a 50-50 or an axle stall. It was a trick was called a kick in. You just place your board on the coping and kick in. And there was a sequence in Skateboarder showing us how to do that because it was a new trick. That was the introduction of. That's where skateboarding moved away from surfing-inspired stuff flowing on the wall to doing things that were from vertical into the bowl. And rock and roll. The rock and roll was the first trick where you sort of basically you were up on a wall, but then all of a sudden you're up on the horizontal platform, and then you're coming back in again. So that was a new realm altogether, and that happened at Pinball Pool. Peter Aiken was the first person we saw in Sydney make a rock and roll.
Amazing.
So that was groundbreaking stuff for us in Australia to take, what we'd seen in the American magazines and do it, ASAP. You'd rush down to the pool with a magazine in the back of your bag, and you'd be looking at the sequence carefully to see how it's done.
And how was the news getting around? About people doing new tricks? Like, was it just everyone was just talking about it, like word of mouth, like, oh, did you hear so-and-so did this and that? And
Word of mouth, pretty much, yeah, or just there to witness it, sort of thing.
they weren't posting it on social media? Or
That social media didn't exist. Sure.
they weren't sending letters?
Not yet. No. You might have seen a picture in tracks, like for a few years there. For a few years there, David Hill, who was Dave Hill was the state champion skateboarder in the '66 craze.
Okay.
In New South Wales, and he in the late '70s and the early '80s, there was Skateboard World with a team of skateboarders, and David Hill had David Hill Design, and he had his own boards and a distributorship.
DHD.
That's correct. Yeah, and then Aussie came along too, and David Hill would write for Tracks. David Hill wrote a regular column in Tracks for a couple of years there, and he'd sort of cover the results of the latest freestyle comps or what have you, or there'd be articles on ramps going up in Mount Druitt or what have you, or I think Rob Wedge Francis and John McGrath did a road trip down to Adelaide, and that was featured in Tracks magazine article. So yeah, kids around Australia would have seen what was going on, at least on the East Coast, in Australia through Tracks magazine. So,
well, speaking of that era, let's have a look at a video clip from the Manly Skate City New South Wales state titles in 1980. Okay, do you remember this? Can you talk us through it, the blue ramp?
I do, yeah. That was Manly Skate City was where we all sort of went to as soon as it opened in sort of mid-'79.
Right, so no flat bottom.
No flat bottom in that half
allowed.
pipe. That's correct, yeah. Which that was an old school half pipe. That whole park was fiberglass.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
The rock and roll step off?
Step up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who's that? Is
That's
that
Dale Halpin. That's Dale Halpin ripping there, yeah. The guy before it doing the tricky rock and roll was Wedge.
Huh.
Dale skated. He was one of the early riders for Aussie Skates.
Yeah.
He's a Manly boy.
So would you say your first ever board sponsor was DHD or Aussie?
Skateboard World.
Skateboard World was
Skateboard
like
World,
your
yeah.
first sponsor.
Correct, yeah.
And they had boards, like board sponsor. Am I right?
Initially, when I was sponsored by Skateboard World, I was making my own boards at home.
Okay.
But they were flowing me wheels and trucks and safety gear, the works, and then decks. When he started to import good decks from America, I got perhaps one of the earliest 8-inch Alva decks that were imported into Australia.
So they were the boards you got to ride,
so
Alvas.
And I thought I was onto a good thing there, skating for Skateboard World too, because props to David Hill and Tim Dorr and co for making Australian-made boards. DHD had his boards and Aussie had their boards, but through Skateboard World I was able to ride the pick of the best boards from the USA because I wasn't initially affiliated with any of those companies. So
amazing. Let's go through a couple more clips. There's one here, Biff Murdoch, from the same video.
Yes,
Is that Biff?
That is Biff, yeah.
There you go.
He was on the Skateboard World team too. He's riding, we'll both be riding early germ-free boards in that clip at that point in time.
Wow.
So was germ-free like always related to yourself?
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
that was my brand.
How's
brand
the
name.
invert? Far out.
So yeah, germ-free was I think in 79 Mark Lynch, my sponsor, sort of said to me, "Hey Adrian, we can press boards in Australia and I want to put out a model for you." And so, I spent a few months basically looking at blanks, trying out different blanks and trying out different shapes. And late 79, just heading in towards, I think, the Christmas of 79, the first germ-frees came out.
Wow, 79. Like goodness.
Yeah, I was stoked because it was just in the era of, in America, the Sims boards, the Bowmans and the Andrex,
Right.
that had routes. They were putting routes on
that's
the decks.
right, yeah.
It's a grab rail feature sort of thing. And So I put routes down the germ free. And the way I designed my routes was so that they doubled as wheel wells as well.
Yeah, I remember
went
that.
down. So there were wheel wells at the front and the back.
Yeah.
So purely for grabbing any, so you didn't have to use rails.
Yeah, but then rails came in anyway. Then we had the rails as well.
Rails weren't invented there yet?
No. Well,
they weren't when you had those?
No. Wow, interesting. The first rails that came in were these, they were more rubbery, put out by Z Products, Z Flex. Z grabbers they were called, and there's no way you could slide them. They stopped dead. But then they sort of, Z came out with a white sort of chalky sort of plastic ones, and then the real plastic rails developed on from there. So
hey, let's look at some footage of you skating that ramp here. Here it comes. Right up. Is that? No, that's
still Biff.
That's still Biff.
It's a bit of rock and slide there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So this would be like what, 1980?
That was 1980. Yeah, that was the state title comp. You can't see the.
Here we go. Is that you?
That's me there. Yeah, that's correct.
Dude.
That's me there.
Do you feel like frontside airs are like your
rolling into
pretty
the front side
signature,
air
aren't they?
there? They were, yeah. Well, I was the first to do frontside airs in Sydney amongst all of our crew.
Wow.
At Pimble Pool?
No, I learnt them at Balmain actually. Back before Pimble Pool, before we were skating the big pool at Pimble, I learnt them.
How's that?
Learnt them on a ramp which was leaning up against a wall, so I wasn't actually getting out. I was coming off a wall, but landing.
Was that a
on the-
frontside ollie? No hands.
Yeah,
ollie,
that ollie.
wasn't it?
They were early ollies in Manly Skate City at that point in time. We were getting ollies. Biff took them to another level, but yeah, I was really surprised when I saw this clip myself for the first time, only a week or so ago. I'd forgotten that I was doing those ollies at that point in time
amazing,
too.
When did Alan Gelfand first get known for having done it? Do you remember?
Well, that probably would have been 79, 80.
Yeah,
I
right.
think, yeah.
That's a question I was actually going to ask before, back to the sort of getting magazines and looking at stuff and then taking it, for yourselves. How long do you think, how far behind were you guys to what was happening in the magazines that were coming over then? Were you pretty much on the ball of which is obviously months later, from the photo being taken and all that stuff, and probably somewhat the development of the tricks realistically.
Yeah.
But were you pretty much straight onto it when the magazine came out and then, getting there and adapting it and doing it?
I think that's pretty fair to say. We're sort of the lag in magazines, the time lag was about 3 months. The June mag would come to us 3 months later, sort of thing, in September, October. And we were pretty much, if there were new tricks being shown, we were out there trying to learn them as ASAP.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. It probably put us probably 6 months behind, in terms of the standard at any given time.
Yeah.
But then the terrain, it all depends. The terrain was different too. I've since realised back in Sydney in 1978 or 1980, we were skating much smaller pools, and even Manly Skate City was a small, short park with a small bowl. The bowl was a 10-footer, but the parks in America were acres. They were so much bigger and so much deeper, and so we might have been learning rock and rolls in our 8-foot high half pipe with no flat bottom, but the Americans were doing them in 10-foot bowls and that sort of thing too. So that probably had the obvious advantage in terms of terrain over us, And Wedge and I were introduced to that too. Late 78, Christmas 78, we flew over to New Zealand together because we'd just heard that Skatopia had opened in Auckland, New Zealand, which was a copy of the Skatopia skate park in California. And when we got over there, it blew our minds. The half pipe there was 100 metres long. The bowl at the end of it was about 13 foot deep.
Wow.
So the skating was just... Pimble was rad in its own way, a small pool bowl, deep, steep, sharp walls and tight transitions. But there's the speeds that the skaters were riding at in New Zealand were, way ahead of us, and we had to catch up quick. It's like all of a sudden, my God, this half pipe's 100 metres long, and by the time you get to the bottom of it, you're going 30 k's, and then you're confronted by the 13-foot deep bowl at the end of it, So it was another level, but yeah, Wedge and I in the fortnight we were over in New Zealand, we cottoned on pretty quick. But yeah, that was eye-opening. That was a real experience, great experience. Memorable.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
How was the quality of the pours? Do you remember
of the
pour of the concrete and all of that?
Well, Skatopia in New Zealand wasn't too bad. The transitions were generally pretty good. The bowl to describe it as a bowl is not really correct. It was more of a big left-hand bend at the end of the half pipe with two different entry sections. So, but because of the bend, it had one big flat wall and a curve.
Right.
It wasn't a bowl as such, but it was the tragedy, of course, of a lot of skate parks in those days that they'd brush the concrete surface to give it give it some sort of traction or something. I guess was the notion, but really it made them that little bit rougher.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so.
Speaking of rough, have a look at this clip of you skating at North Ryde Bowl. Do you remember this? Is that North Ryde?
I sure do.
That channel looks scary. That bowl looks scary.
That whole bowl was pretty scary. That was pretty kinked out.
Look how big it is. So that was kink.
There, you can even see the line. The dark lines around the walls. It's
like cracks.
They're just, I guess, where they use different coloured concrete to cover up various kinks or something like that. But it was relative. There were good walls in that bowl, and there was a couple of walls where there would be a bit of a bump or a lump, and you just sort of adjust your lines to miss those.
Inside had that channel.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we learned that.
Do you reckon you could do it?
There was a big channel at the bowl at Manly too, as well, which we got to.
Let's have a look at that. That's amazing. I got some more footage here from that clip you sent me. So North Ryde had a half pipe as well. Is that North Ryde?
That's correct. Yeah. That's Biff there with the black t-shirt on. That was a long half pipe with varying depths on the way down. It started like that where he's there in the shallow. There was a rounded lip.
Yep.
Then there was a section that was about 10 foot deep with coping that stuck out about 3 or 4 inches.
They didn't like flat bottom back then, hey?
No, that's right. Well, the Skatopia, both Skatopia half pipe and the Manly Skate City half pipes were, as I said, modelled on that the one from America, and they were literally, the term half pipe was because they were half a pipe, a pipe cut in half. And Ryde, those extensions there at Ryde, that was about 12 foot deep there.
Wow!
And you'd fly down and you could do exits off the end of that.
No helmet either.
Yeah, well, that's when the park would have been closed. The park Ryde too went through different phases of being open and then closed, and they put at one stage they put a roller skating track all the way around the outside of it to give it a new lease of life and sort of built a pro shop. But yeah, it existed for a handful of years there, and after Manly closed, we all gravitated to Ryde on weekends.
Yeah,
and that's what those sessions there in that clip would have been.
Deep question, watching this. Describe the mindset of AJ on that day, on that era. Where were you at as a person, do you think? Were you in a good space?
Yeah.
Enjoying the best time of your life, or were you?
In a transitional phase, probably. We were still skating. Manly Skate City had closed, and with that, and with Ryde sort of being closed as well, it was like it was dying in the arse again. And I'd started at university. I'd previously been... I actually had a period during Manly Skate City where I was a so-called, pro skater, because I had the germ-free board out, and I would work at Skateboard World Shop from 8 a.m. till midday, and then I'd go skating for the rest of the day, but I was getting paid a full-time wage. So, and my sponsor was allowing me to do that so that I could keep my skating standard up, because Manly Skate City had opened and Wedge, Francis and John McGrath were working and or living at Manly Skate City, and so they had that advantage. They were at Manly every day. And I'd previously been working in the shop full time, but Mark and then Peter Lynch sort of said, no, you need to keep your standard up. So you go skating in the afternoon and we won't dock your pay. You know, so in a sense, I was a part-time pro skater. But yeah, so and that to get back to your question.
So if you're on the Dole and you were skateboarding, were you a pro skater back then?
I was never on the Dole, no.
No, I'm not saying, but did you say you were?
If you were, yeah.
That's a pro career.
Maybe you could, that's right, yeah. There was a bunch of my mates who were pro skaters, if you want to look at it that way.
Anyway,
that's right.
Bit of a tangent.
Yeah, for sure,
I remember there was the Johnny Howard surf team, my friends used to call it down in Nowra.
Well, that's right. Well, there was definitely a Johnny Howard skating team, and I know that existed in Sydney and up in the Gold Coast, all around Australia, you know. There are a bunch of skaters at Pimlico. There were a bunch of skaters who slept there, who would travel there from Balmain and camp out in the abandoned showroom, and so they'd be there first thing the next day to get their rides in before us older skaters arrived, you know, or before the scene sort of came down on it all. So
going back to, you know, just getting online again with a bit of a chronology, you said you're at university around that time, which was like mid-'80s. What were you studying exactly?
Yeah. I did an economics degree at Sydney University. I sort of, skating had died in the arse, as I was saying, and I was a bit lost as to what I was going to do next, and I was still living at home, so there was a bit of pressure. You know, you've got to do, you know, you've done skateboarding now, Adrian, you know, let's try something, get serious about life, you know, and pressure from my girlfriend's parents at the time. Not pressure, just I guess I paid heed to what they were their suggestions, you know, listening to the voices around me, and thought I may as well get an economics degree. I don't really know what I want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point in time. So did you complete the degree and then get a job in that? I did,
sort of industry?
yeah. I sort of. It's a weird one for me. I sort of kind of regret the decision. I never really had any interest in economics or natural affinity for it, but I did it because mostly my father sort of said, you know, with accounting, economics, you'll always be able to get a job. You know, that'll keep you stable. And he was right. And he was right. You know, it's always helped me be able to find a good 9-to-5 job throughout my working years. So I did the degree and I battled through it. I really didn't want to be there. I was still skating full on, surfing every day. I'd rock up to university lectures in my thongs with sand on my feet and go surfing in between lectures down at Mareeba or Bondi, and then go skating with Sin in the afternoon down at Manly at Curl Park or at Ryde, as you saw. I just scraped through my degree each year. Indeed, last year I had to do supplementary exams. That's where you get 49 out of 100 in your final exam, and they give you a second chance. You know? but that was a real bugger, because it meant that during what would have been the celebratory Xmas holidays, what have you, I was bunkered down studying to do that damn exam again. So,
well, all your friends are out skating and so.
Exactly, and surfing, but I got through it in the end. Yeah. So, yeah.
And so you were in like a serious relationship around that time as well?
No. I was when I first started uni, yeah. Okay. Yeah, from my first girlfriend.
Gotcha.
That was in the Manly Skate City days, and into the early uni years. Yeah, skateboarding. I'd started surfing a hell of a lot more too, back in the late Manly Skate City era, 1980. One of my skating mates, Peter Aiken, had moved down to Avalon, and so I was staying at his place a lot, or often stayed at Wedge's flat in Manly, and I always had a surfboard on the roof of my car. I was surfing and skating every day.
Yeah, interesting. So you and Wedge were like kind of thick as thieves,
we were for a handful of years. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And when did that kind of start to peter off?
When Manly Skate City closed.
When it closed, okay.
Wedge became a serious adult much sooner than I did, and he was offered the job managing. The owners of Manly Skate City owned the restaurant above it too, on the pier where it was, and Wedge spent some years managing the restaurant there.
Okay.
And he was in a serious relationship then too, and
he was pretty much adult, Ty. Just wondering. Still wondering. I'm still trying to work that out.
Asking for a mate.
Yeah. No, Wedge will tell you he's still not a serious adult now. He's come back from that. I mean,
He realised that it doesn't actually work.
Oh, no. I shouldn't speak for Wedge. No,
I'm in that phase.
he came back to
That's right.
skateboarding again after giving it up
Did
for a
he?
number of years with the.
That must be a common theme you've seen over 50 years of skateboarding. People quitting, coming back, quitting, coming back.
Yeah.
They all come back, don't they? In some way.
They do, and I think it's really happened since the early 2000s with that's when skate parks started to appear more frequently, and councils started to put them in larger and larger numbers. You know, it's just exponentially grown now, obviously, but and also with that came the old school, the concept of old school skateboarding. You know, and there were jams. Bradshaw organised a skate jam in 2002 at Maroubra Skate Park, and that brought together skaters of my generation and subsequent generations to that bowl from Melbourne, Queensland, Adelaide. Skaters came from everywhere. It's like, hey, we're still doing this, you know. And look, the council's put a bowl in at Maroubra.
the beach.
There's finally in Australia there is a decent bowl skate park after all the other pathetic attempts, kinked out, rough as guts, attempts at making skate parks that we made do with over the years. We started to get some decent bowls and parks, and it's like, hang on a sec, we may be 40 years of age, but we've still got our pads, as dusty and crusty as they are, and if you're fit enough, you find that you can still do it, and you don't go and try and do a 540 or anything. You just stick with what you know.
But did you ever stop?
No, I was talking to
did you
Ty
never
about
stop?
that earlier on. I never really stopped. I had periods where what I would describe as slowed down a bit here and there. And that would have been predominantly during the 90s, early 90s, when I was working. I was sort of co-parenting my son. My first marriage had broken up, and I'd just obviously looking after Oscar on a part-time basis. My weekends weren't my own so much anymore, but they were in a way. I'd sort of go skating with Oscar and keep my sort of foot in the door of skateboarding in that way. Going to Waterloo Skate Park, teaching him to skate there, having fun there at Heffron Park down the southern suburbs, occasionally Mona Vale. But yeah, always had a skateboard, and at least once a month was out skating. If it wasn't with just small sessions with Oscar, my son, I'd go and have a session with my mates. About once a month. Biff was always at me. Biff Murdoch was still skating in a pretty hungry sort of fashion out at Mona in the early 90s and through the 90s, and he'd always sort of elbow me and say, "When you're coming out, Adrian, when you're coming out." So every month or two I'd hop in the car with Biff and have a session out at Mona.
As a single dad, did you find that like skateboarding really helped you find a common activity you could do with your children or your son, and that bound you together? And the reason I ask that is because that's what's sort of going on with me and my son at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, well, sometimes you don't know what to do. How do I entertain these kids?
Yes, yeah.
And then you've got this thing. It's like, oh, hang on.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it was. There's it was something that we could both do together. In amongst the soccer and the throwing the balls around or going to the beach, all the rest of it. It was just one of the many activities that we did together. But the skating was one that there was a common bond there. He never really got into it in an obsessive way like I did. He tried his hands at a number of different sports, and his passion became music in the end, guitar playing. But skating certainly through the years. He had two different phases. When he was quite little, between about 4 and about 8, then he slowed down a bit and was doing lots of soccer and cricket and sort of other sports like that. And but he came back to it again when he was about, I think he was 11-ish. We were living in Bondi. The mini ramp down at Bondi was there. He'd occasionally come and have a skate with us. But in Bondi in 2000, I was renting a flat. We were renting in Simpson Street, and the flat actually, the small block of old apartments, had a pool in the backyard. and the landlord announced that they were going to trash the pool and put in driveway and car parks. And like I was thinking, the skater in me is thinking, yeah, but the leaseholder of me is thinking, no, I can't do that. The landlord's not going to enjoy that. They'll kick us out. They'll evict us. But I told Biff about it. You know, he lived around the corner. I was a good mate, seeing him regularly. And he's like, no, we've got to do this, Adrian. We've got to do this. And like I was saying, no, I don't think so, Biff, no. And one day Biff just rocked up at my place with a pump early in the morning. He'd gone and hired a pump. And it's like, we're doing this, Adrian, we're doing this. And so we emptied the pool in our backyard. It wasn't a good pool. It was a rectangular shaped pool. It had transition in the deep end corners. So you could actually go up in the corner, pull it out onto the flat wall or the side wall, and you'd be coming down in a virtual wall ride. There was a minimal transition in the centre of the walls, but that was there for a couple of months. And because it was there, my son got back into skateboarding heavily during that phase. He was doing fakies from corner to corner, and so were all the other kids in the block of units too, you know. And
sick.
So yeah, Oscar was skating with us then with all the local boys.
Hey, sorry, go Ty. I want to get a clip up while you guys talk.
Sure.
I was going to
yeah.
say, well, to bring up another photo and to take it back to Biff again, and like to you actually having the first model. Like I know, like I said, my first memory of you was yours and Biff's models together on the wall. When did Biff's model come out? And then how did that whole relationship, you know, start up? Because Biff was pretty influential as well. With
Absolutely,
so many people.
yeah. I first met Biff through Skateboard World. My sponsor there, Mark Lynch, he'd travel around the suburbs and in distributing equipment to various shops and stuff, and people would write to him too, you know, me and my mates are hot skaters, come and see our local scene. And he discovered Biff down in the Rose Bay, Bondi area and told me about this guy down at Bondi who's really quite hot. And, I was invited him to a session. We were going to skate these pipes near Mascot. And Biff came along with Barney, Biff's close skating mate at that era. And Biff, he skated with us at the pipes that day, and it was obviously he was a ripper. We invited him to the pool, Pimble Pool. That was right in the middle of the Pimble Pool era, and Biff came out there, and Pimble Pool era was in full swing, and Biff was a bit late to it, so he was 6 months behind us in standard initially there, but he quickly caught up. But then when Manly Skate City opened in late 79, early 80, Biff's natural ability just started to really show, and he was just learning tricks, bang, bang, bang. Each week he would learn the latest trick faster than anyone else, and with just beautiful style. And I really pressured Mark Lynch to get Biff on the Skateboard World team. I said, if we don't sponsor him now, he's got offers from, DHD and Aussie. They're all after him. So Biff was on the team, and I was just totally stoked with that because we started skating together a real lot, going down to comps in Victoria together. And once the germ-free deck came out in 79, 80, Mark Lynch sort of thought, well, this is selling well. I can give Biff a model too. So
is that the model?
That's correct. Yeah, that's
wow. Thanks, Ty, for getting that one up.
Yeah, that was a.
It's a classic.
It is.
I'd love to have that now.
Yeah. That's right. He sort of.
I like
a little bit controversial.
The graphic up around the nose.
Yeah, well, they sort of a bit controversial because they copied a little bit of the sort of the German sort of style of graphic art, but nonetheless, it looked really cool at the time, And
why did Biff choose that himself, or
as far as I know, Biff, he was like that sort of imagery. Biff, I think he got John Tez, who was a great graphic artist, helped him with some of the design of that as well, from memory too.
Yeah. While we got it up, there's the image of the.
That's the bottom of the deck. Yeah, you can see it had routes as well.
They're the routes. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So he's had a different configuration of routes. Yeah. Sort of looks like a bit of a Messerschmitt or something there. With a Maltese cross on it. But
I was going to say, it looks like a Maltese cross.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Look at those wheel wells there. They seem too high.
Well, we only had 3.5 inch noses in those days.
Of course.
And nowadays Biff probably had a shorter nose than I did on his deck. His deck was 29.5 inches long. Mine was 30. He designed his a half an inch shorter because he figured that if you start with a 30-inch deck, after 3 weeks it's going to be knocked down to 29.5 inches anyway.
Oh, it's like practicalities.
But board running into gutters and
economics, not function.
I don't know.
Look at these classic boards here, hey? So
there's a collection.
Talk us through them a little bit.
There's a collection of germ-frees there.
Germ-free, so there's an Adrian Jones Pro model there.
Yeah, so the ones with the routes on the sort of sitting on the bed more or less there, the yellow one and the white one, they're the original germ-frees.
Get out.
And they had, as well as the routes, they had an early layer of P-Tex on the bottom, the stuff that Powell originally called bonite. So I had bonite on my Pro model before it the cardboard stuff. Yeah, you got it. So that was another feature of those decks. But so there's the original ones there. The black one at the back was the germ-free. The original one sold for about 4 years or something to about 84 or something. And that black one was the next model. No, it wasn't. Actually, there was a one in between that. That black one was the third one. There were 3 germ-free shapes put out by Skateboard World.
So what sort of royalties were you getting for your board sales? If any?
I can't really remember. I was getting royalties.
There was royalties?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I wasn't earning a fortune, but it was $1 or something a deck from memory, $1.30 or something
there was income.
a deck. Yes, yeah.
Not just free stuff.
All those years, no.
Wow. So
and
you must be one of the... I mean, you literally are the first Australian pro skateboarder.
I think in a sense...
In terms of getting paid.
In terms of having a model... I was, it wasn't a model manufactured in America by one of the big corporations, but there was a midget Farrelly board in the 60s. He had a signature model, but he wasn't a skater, obviously. I had the first actual sort of like model with my name on it.
So
came 79, 80 and was earning royalties from it from the get-go.
So legendary.
And then Biff was the second.
And Biff was this, Wedge. But Wedge was a pro skater. Wedge Francis was the at Manly Skate City when that opened. He was the so-called pro skater at the park, and he would come and do lessons and teach kids. But it quickly evolved into basically just being the manager of the park, on the day.
Yeah.
Where he actually couldn't skate. He had to stay in the shop, sell the tickets. Stop skaters from sneaking in, that sort of thing.
Right.
Manage the pin. There was a huge pinball parlour there as well too. So
right.
I just got an image up there, AJ, taken by David Mock.
Yes,
photo.
yes, yeah.
And that is on one of the ones with the routed, that front side area.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, and where's that exactly?
That's at Port Macquarie.
Peppermint Park.
Macquarie.
That's at Peppermint Park. Yeah.
You know it?
I know of it. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Never skated it.
Peppermint Park was a great place. That was
just on a
84,
side note.
Sure, mate. Yeah.
Just shout out to this week's featured artist, Marty Baptist. Like we just had the skull image of Biff's board up, and then that one came up. I don't know if we can go back to that. Just he's got a black skull up there, but
that's great. Yeah,
just amazing.
It is. Yeah.
It's been anyway. Sorry,
beautiful work. Yeah. Peppermint Park, Port Macquarie. Yeah, that was really significant. For me, the trips to Port Macquarie, around about between 83 to 84.
Yeah.
Bunches of us from Sydney and on the long weekends and what have you would pile into cars, and because the parks in Sydney were pretty crap and limited, and we remembered that Peppermint Park was up there, and it actually had a really well-made capsule-ended half-pipe run. And I can't remember how it began, maybe through Sin Eglia. He knew some of the skaters up in the Gold Coast, but we started signalling to skaters up north that we're going to be there this long weekend. You guys should come down. And so we'd all head up from Sydney, and guys from Brisbane and Lismore, Gary Nolan from Lismore, and Gold Coast crew would come down too. I know some of the Newcastle skaters, Cos and them, came up to Newcastle as well at that time. the Blacktowners came out too, Johnny Gray and crew, Andrew Hulley, bunches and bunches of us. So in that sense, the Victorians weren't there, but all the Queenslanders and the Sydney skate scenes would converge on Peppermint Park for these riotous long weekends or Easter holidays, skateboarding and partying. Good. And that was when I first ever met Gary Nolan and Darren Burford and saw and Toby Maloney and Robbie Brasher, some of those Queensland skaters. But Gary Nolan was mind-blowing.
I guess Port Macquarie's kind of like right a bit more in the middle, right?
Well, it's pretty much a midway point for us all. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so great place to meet. The Rivermouth.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I wrote a song about that one once. Yeah,
you wrote a song about it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Peppermint Park. Yeah. Meet in the middle at the Rivermouth. Yeah.
Who'd you sing it with?
We go north, they come south.
Was that in?
I sing that by myself. And I don't know if I've played that one with Johnny. I probably have.
I was going to say, is that in the John Gray?
I jam with Johnny Gray occasionally. We haven't for a while now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we go occasionally. We get together and bash out some of the many songs that I write over the years just at home. It's a pastime that I've enjoyed for a long time. Yeah, another creative outlet. But Bill Schaefer, one of my oldest friends, has come along to a few of those jams too. He's another skater from right back to the boat ramp days, pinball pool days. He's a great guitarist. Comes along too. Greg Ambler, who sadly just passed, he would come along. He's another skater from Blacktown. I know him from the pinball pool days. He's a great bass player, guitarist, production, keyboards. Greg played anything and everything. He was great.
So in terms of really significant skate spots, it's the boat ramp.
Yeah.
Would you say pinball pool?
Yes.
And I know, is it Hulley's ramp?
That's right. Yeah.
So from what I've gathered, that was quite a very significant, I guess, ramp in the history of Australian skateboarding from what I hear.
Yep.
So is that an image from Hulley's ramp?
That's an image. I whacked that in there because that's the first half pipe Andrew built in his backyard.
So
that's not the big one that became famous.
That's not the Hulley's ramp.
No, that's actually an 8-footer that he had for about 6 months.
Okay.
As an experiment, just to see if he could build a half pipe. But then we rode that for a while, and then he built the 11-footer. Which is in the footage that you've got there.
I've got that, yep. I've got that up.
Yeah.
That's a big air for an 8-foot ramp.
I was going to say.
Well, yeah, that was that was the same era we were going to Port Macquarie.
So is this the one, my friend?
Yes, it is, yep.
So how big was it, 13 foot?
No, that's 11 foot deep. Good solid
11
10.
foot, it looks
maybe
bigger.
11 and a half. It had a solid 10-foot tranny, and then you got a foot to a foot and a half of vert on the top.
No way.
Yeah, there was a defunct nursery in the block behind his house, and that nursery happened to be falling apart, and it's just slowly disappeared over the months, and a ramp over the fence appeared. So
and it had a roll in.
Had a roll in, yeah.
Who's that?
That's John Gray right there.
Is that
Watch him lock that
Johnny
one.
Gray? Look,
yeah, that's Johnny Gray. Locked that hand plant beautifully. Yeah.
Wow.
That was this footage is from a competition that Fox put on in spring of 1985. He called it the Spring Ramp Jam. That's Mick Mulhall.
Is that Mick Mulhall?
That's Johnny Gray doing an invert channel plant. Yeah. That's Sin Eglia.
Going high.
Yeah.
Who's this?
That's yours truly.
There he is.
Oh, the bail shots, gosh.
Come on,
there's a few
man.
good runs in there, I'm sure, yeah. That's Sin.
How's
There's the
the
sound
music
system. There's the sound system.
Just hang the ghetto
There's Mick
blaster.
Mulhall there. He was still the kid at that
Unbelievable.
stage. Nicknamed the Kid.
The Kid.
Mick was a fellow Skateboard World team member with me too in the mid '80s.
Mind blowing.
Travelled with Mick down to a Moomba Ramp Jam, probably '85 or '86.
Mick.
There's Sin again. Sin had just come back from the States. Sin, that's Matt Davis.
Wow.
Mavis, they're doing a boneless.
So you said Sin just come back from the States. Was that just that's a big thing when like an Australian skater and they come back from the States and they're just different all of a sudden.
That's exactly.
Is that what happened to
That's
him?
what happened with us all. Sin came back from America.
Yeah.
And his pump had just sort of improved exponentially. All of a sudden, he was blasting huge indie airs, big lean airs, and he was introducing us to lean to tails and big long lengthy nose, lean grinds and stuff like that. Yeah, he introduced us. He just developed a whole lot of power.
Amazing.
When he came back from the States. And I think that was his second trip there too by that stage.
And just stories probably of just what's happening over there. And
he was establishing roots.
inspired.
He was establishing roots in the States because he eventually moved over there a year or so after that.
Yeah. When was your first trip to the States?
I didn't actually go to the States till 2011 for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So as a 51-year-old. So
And what was the trip for?
Just to experience it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd never been. I'd regretted that I'd never been to the States in my younger years. It sort of goes back to those regrets I mentioned before about going to uni. You know, kind of one point. For many years, I kind of tortured myself thinking, you know, I should have gone to the States at that point in time. Skateboarding might have died in the arse in Sydney and Australia. If I was true to my passion, I perhaps should have gone to the States and seen what I could have made of it there, but didn't get round to that. I sort of, you know.
I love that you're reflecting like this, like things you would have done differently.
Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting to hear as someone who's younger and for people even younger.
Yeah.
You know, I'm starting to really appreciate my elderly parents more and trying to tap into, you know, their life experiences and asking them, like, what would you have done differently in this experience, in this life, you know? And you're saying the couple of things you've said now is like,
that's right,
doing a job or a university degree that didn't really want to do.
Yeah.
But you don't regret it.
No, that's you know, I say they're regrets, and you can torture
or
yourself with them,
experiences.
but you make do with the decisions you make.
Okay.
You know, and you go with that, and you make the most of that. You know, and I don't regret, you know, that through the years I've been able to hold down a good job that supported my family and what have you through the years, and that's really important too. So, and although I was doing that job, I still, as I was talking with Ty earlier on, I still skated all the time. I still had my friends through the years that I'd connected with through skateboarding, and still do through to this day. You know. So.
Well, you seem quite healthy. You look healthy and fit. I mean, that era you grew up in was just synonymous with heavy partying and drug use.
Right.
I mean, were you able to avoid that, or did you get sucked into it for periods?
Look, during my early skateboarding competitive years, I didn't get sucked into that at all. You would go to the pub on Friday nights with the crew and stuff like that, but I didn't really try experiment or party with anything else. But later on, I did, but always in kind of moderation. You know, that sort of kept it under control to a degree. You know, and never let it sort of take over or rule my life, sort of thing. So. But yeah, you've got to, you know, I'd say that spring ramp jam we were watching there at Hulley's, you know, I was probably high then, but so were probably half the other skaters, you know, but that's just the way it was, you know. That's sort of
Let's keep watching a bit more of it because it's so epic.
Sin wouldn't have been, but certainly many others of us would have been. That's me there, the bread.
Going high, look at that.
Is that sort of where the Errol moniker came from?
It was, yeah. That was my forte, back-to-back airs.
Yeah.
That back in the 70s and even in the 80s too.
I don't know if it was Ty that told me that it evolved from Errol.
Errol to Errol.
I didn't.
That's
You
right.
didn't tell me. Who was I talking to?
No.
Oh, I was talking to Luke from Cockroach Wheels, and he
okay.
said
Yeah,
that. He
yeah,
said,
yeah,
I think it evolved from being Adrian Errol Jones. And the backstory is awesome. That's linked to such a awesome Aussie song.
Yeah, that's right. And then the germ free moniker is when Mark Lynch was putting out my board. He said, "What do you want to call it? You know, you can have your own brand, sort of thing." And settled on germ free designs. And the reason for that was back in the Manly Skate City era, there was X-Ray Specs, were a punk band around that time, had a song called Germ Free Adolescence. And one of the local skaters, Adam Dott's nickname was Germ, and he was someone who lived the total party lifestyle to excess. And him and some of the other guys started to call me Germ Free because I was, as I said before, I was pretty clean living in those days. And so I just sort of thought, germ-free, I'll call it germ-free designs. But it tied into the punk music, ethos that was central to skateboarding at that time too. It was a well-known sort of punk pop song from that era too. So
Amazing
I thought,
how these things evolve, hey?
Was there, like you sort of saying that how you did, was there a straight edge ethos going through the punk scene then? Because I know there has been eras of that, and guys that get like a black X tattooed, I think, on their wrists and stuff. I know a few American guys
Not really,
who
no.
did.
Okay.
And they were like straight edge and they were like
right.
sticking to that. That was a thing. Like
I think that did evolve a little later, yeah.
Okay,
yeah, that wasn't. I'm sure there might have been, I don't know, I'm not sure who, there might have been some totally clean living guys in that 70s generation of skaters that I'm from, but most of us were like any other teenager, when you reach the age of, to being able to legally go into a pub or a club or whatever, you jump on it for a little while there, you give it your best shot. Or even beforehand, at various parties, you're sort of there with older guys who might, pass a few on sort of thing. No.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that image of the Coke ramp
Yes.
and the
yes.
Coke skateboard. Were
That's
Coke paying
right.
you money? Come on.
Just for the demos.
Just for the demos.
Occasional demos. I didn't do many with Coke in that mid 80s Coke era.
Who's that on the flat bottom, you reckon? Can you see? Bit hard to see.
Can't quite see from here, no. Might have been Mick Mulhall was there that day. John Fox was there. Oh no, John Fox was behind the lens. Actually, thanks John for that photo.
Classic.
That's yeah.
And this one in skate, and speaking of John Fox,
I whacked that one in
editor
there.
of Skate and Life.
I had to put that in there. That was for two reasons. Firstly, that was a pull-out poster in the Skating Life magazine.
And for those listening, it's a frontside grind in a bowl. Which one?
Dover Heights pool.
Dover Heights.
Yeah,
Interesting.
It was one of the better pools that Sydney's ever produced.
Okay.
And I put it in there too because I'm riding an ATS board.
Yeah. Classic.
ATS is a huge significant part of my skating life too. With Dave Mock. Dave Mock started ATS with Andrew Hulley in about 86 or 87, and then Andrew pulled out. I think he was keen to get into. He became a shop fitter, and Dave was looking for. I lived with Dave during the mid 80s. We were best mates for a long time, really close, and he knew I was unhappy in my job. By that stage, I'd finished uni. I'd worked in a chartered accounting firm, then worked for another investment firm, doing accounting work, saving lots of money but not being very happy. And he sort of said, "Do you want to jump in with me into ATS?" And so I invested. And from 87 through to about 1990, Dave and I did ATS as a partnership together. It was predominantly a backyard operation out of Dave's mum's place at Strathfield.
There you go.
We were getting the boards pressed at a couple of different places out in the western suburb of Sydney. But yeah, we gave it our best shot there for a handful of years.
So you only had a board sponsor, and over the years, it's predominantly been board sponsors. Like, do you have trucks and wheel sponsors? Like, what were your go-tos there?
Yeah, for a while there, the Skateboard World were putting out a germ-free wheel, which was not a great wheel. I can admit to that. But and Peter Lynch, they started putting them out without really conferring with me about it. It just all of a sudden they appeared. But I was getting the royalties from them, and at that stage I thought, bugger it, it's too late now. It's already on the shelves. So, but then from the very, very early days, even from the late 70s, I met Tim Dorr at Balmain Wave, a skate spot across the harbour from the boat ramp we spoke of earlier. And Tim Dorr would come down. There were other Aussie skaters in the Pimble Pool era. And, Tim Dorr, of course, as many skaters would know, began with Aussie, then went on to Cockroach, then went to Cortec. Through those years, in whatever wheels Tim was producing, he'd give me samples to try, going right back to the early Aussie wheels. And then the early Cockroach wheels as well. But yeah, I didn't really start I was sponsored by Cockroach in the mid '80s. I think I might have been featured in ads, and he was flowing me wheels all the time then. But in the Aussie era, I wasn't really sponsored by them as such, because the skating scene was so competitive in those days, and because I skated for Skateboard World, I wasn't allowed to cross boundaries and be co-sponsored by Aussie sort of thing. There sort of, or it just didn't. There was a lot of kind of paranoia between the various manufacturers or what have you, which was crazy because my best mates were riding for David Hill's team, and then Dwayne Hecketer and other good mates were skating. Sin were skating for Aussie, So it's like the manufacturers and the businesses themselves might have had their little beefs and paranoias and competitive battles, but the skaters, we were just all in it together,
So amazing, dude. And I love this photo.
I was going to bring this one up.
Oh, you've got
sure.
to, yeah.
You seen this one before, Ty? No,
Yeah. I picked that one as
you picked that one out too.
To point out, obviously, it shows Biff and everyone's old mate Finn in there, and it just spoke to me as a classic. I mean, it would be evident that it's at a backyard pool, probably.
Correct, yeah.
And so obviously, Biff and John are also no longer with us, and it just spoke as just a classic skate photo, basically. And I was keen to hear the story with this one. Obviously, the police, but they're looking pretty unfussed. And who took the photo?
I think it's Dave Mock photo. Dave and I would have headed over there with Biff. That was a pool in Mona Vale, just across the road and down the road from where the ramp is nowadays, or the park is nowadays. It was in I don't know how it was in a sort of a closed down dental facility, a home that had obviously had a pool that had become a dentist office, and it was there for a while. It was a pretty good pool, and we'd sessioned it quite a few times, but on that occasion, as you can see, we were rudely interrupted by the boys and girls in blue. So that's Biff, and we probably would have met Finn over there. I'm not sure. He might have come over in the car with us. I can't remember.
I wonder what Finn was saying there.
Oh, he was giving them cheek, no doubt. Because I think one of the cops even looks like one of them looks like they're smiling a bit, But Biff's got a grin on his face, so I think Finn would have been joking around in some way.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that how you remember Finn mostly, for being a bit of a joker?
Of course, yeah. Oh, yeah, he could make light of tense situations. Biff could too. Biff did too, as well. But Finn certainly, he could read people really well, and he knew the situation. We knew we weren't going to be handcuffed or anything like that. We weren't going to be taken down the station. They were just telling us to get out of there. Don't do this again, guys, we were joking around a bit, I think.
And this photo, this is a great... Oh, sorry, go.
Just before I move on from that, I asked Johnny this before, as in Johnny Gray.
Yeah.
What's a classic Finn moment for you, a particularly memorable one?
Oh, I think probably goes back to the Port Macquarie trips that we spoke of earlier on. Mm-hmm. Finn was just starting to come. His skating level was just starting to really sort of come on then, and or in the Ryde, especially at Rydalmere, Andrew Hulley's ramp, Johnny Gray and Finn started to catch up very quickly. And at Port Macquarie, I remember one particular trip. We rocked up to the skate park, and the Blacktown boys were known, Finn and Bim and some of the other guys were known to party pretty hard, and they just rocked up with cases of beer like at 10 o'clock in the morning at Peppermint Park, or in their cars. I don't think you could take them into Peppermint Park, but I can just remember Finn sort of rocking up enthusiastically, keen to skate Peppermint Park, but just being so trashed from the beginning of the session that it made for some really interesting trick attempts and curly slams that he kind of bounced back up from with a big grin and laugh on his face.
Probably some amusing commentary.
No doubt, yeah,
coinciding.
absolutely, yeah. So that was Finn in his wilder days,
Yeah, sure.
I think once he got onto Rydalmere and Quakers Hill and early Fairfield in those days when he was a total shredder, he was able to moderate himself a lot more practical way.
Yeah, sure.
So that he was able to perform. Yep.
Where did you meet Finn at?
Finn was part of the Blacktown crew that used to rock up to Pimblpool at 7 or 8 in the morning before Wedge and I and Peter Aiken and our crew rocked up. They got there early to get their rides in before us.
Right.
And yeah, Finn, John Gray, Greg Ambler, Steve Henshaw, they were the Blacktown boys. So I've known Finn since 1978. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, and John Gray. So
Interesting.
yeah,
This photo we got up, classic. Can you
Yes.
talk us through it for those who are listening and
For
not watching the
sure.
visual, just from left to right, like
left you've got that's David Hill, the guy who I mentioned.
DHD.
DHD skateboards.
Not to be
Yeah.
confused with the surfboard brand.
That's
DHD,
right. It currently
yeah.
exists. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was DHD in the late 70s.
Yeah.
My brother had a DHD board.
Good on
which
him.
One of the first boards I ever rode.
Okay.
Really?
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
Original.
Yeah, for sure.
What are we
This
talking like in the 80s?
would have been mid-80s.
Mid-80s.
Yeah, mid to
79
early
into the
80s.
80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he distributed DHD boards around Australia and into New Zealand. He formed a partnership with Edwards in New Zealand.
That's right.
DHD
Yeah,
Edwards. They produced the Power Pivot, which went on to sell millions across the world. But yeah, as I said, he was a skater from the 60s, a champion skater from the 60s who saw the opportunity in the late 70s, 80s to have a go at creating an Australian skate industry.
So good.
David's in that shot for that reason. Next to David is Dale Halpin, old friend again. I've known Dale since the Pimblpool era. And skating at Manly Skate City. He was one of the earliest sponsored riders on for Aussie
Gotcha.
of the younger generation. The earliest skaters Aussie sponsored were some of the guys that Matt Thomas, who made the boards with Tim, and the Geraghty brothers. They were from Dale's neighbourhood down Balgowlah, Manly. So yeah, Dale's one of the early sponsored skaters from that era. And of course, next to Dale, of course, popping his head in there is the grinning Finn, again in the background. Yeah, he's in there because he's Finn and he was, part of the 70s and 80s and into the 90s generation of skaters.
Amazing.
That
Of course.
Sydney knew and everyone loved. And there's my ugly mug there. And then next to me on my
You're
right.
looking kind of serious, actually.
Yeah, I don't know why. There's a series of shots there. My partner Kathy took these, and in the next shot I'm actually grinning away. But because there's a series of us clowning around. But next to me is Bill Schaefer, who is one of the original Balmain boys, who I met through the back in 76, 77. In the boat ramp days, they skated.
Boat ramp days.
I'd meet them.
I'm going to the boat ramp. Just
Guys
to
would
check
come
it
across
out.
from Balmain. There was a scene in Balmain. They'd come across, skate the boat ramp with me and my brother. Then we'd catch the ferry back over to Balmain and skate their spots over there. They had the Balmain Wave, which was a bank in the Lever and Kitchen factory. And so I've known Bill right back to then. Bill was a skater in the Pimblpool days. He and he's one of my closest friends to this day. I hang out with him as much as I can. We play music together. Yeah, he's a good old friend. He introduced my partner to me 28 years ago. So
Amazing.
yeah, he's
Congratulations. 28 years.
So that's why Bill's in there. You're a good old mate. And next to Bill is Wedge Francis, Rob Wedge Francis from Melbourne.
Amazing.
Who, as I mentioned earlier on, was one of my closest skating mates for a handful of years there back in the late 70s, 1980, 81.
When do you reckon this photo was... Oh, sorry, Ty.
Is he still the record holder of most 360s in Australia?
I wouldn't be surprised. He probably still beat most people at them.
Yeah,
I don't
no.
know. Sean Gladwell might give him a run for his money.
True.
But Wedge can still do multiple 360s to this day. That's
No
correct.
way.
Yeah. and he's instrumental in running in the whole Moss movement. And we're just that photo is also significant because it was taken at the very first Sydney Old School Jam that I mentioned that Bradshaw put together in 2002 at Maroubra Bowl. Yeah,
got you. And I'm glad. Thanks for clarifying. I was going to ask because that's a bit more modern times. And speaking, and we are sort of getting some more modern times. Look at this one.
Ah, yes, yeah.
Bondi Bowl.
That's me riding
Bolorama
in a Bolorama comp on my Old Man Army manufactured germ-free board.
How wide is that?
Model.
That one, I mean, compared to your old boards that you grew up on, I mean, it looks so narrow, but it's probably still like a 9-inch board?
No, there was a 9-incher. Yeah. The original germ-frees were 10 3/4, so, they were quite the pig.
3/4, my goodness.
That's right. Yeah, so, significantly narrower, but still, it's still wider than most paddle pops at 9 inches.
Less kinky than the pinball pool?
Most certainly. A lot more generous transition, both in the shallow and deep ends. Yeah. That was great. Bondi, I lived, a 2-minute bike ride from Bondi Bowl for many years in its early existence, so it was my local for a long time. And the Bolorama contests were just were significant for me in my skating days. In that,
why?
Just because it gave me and my friends Johnny Gray and I used to passionately love the Bolorama comps because we were skating with our heroes from the 70s and 80s. That was just unthinkable to us back in the day. We weren't fortunate enough to get over to the States to skate with the Eddie Algueras and the Steve Olsons and all the Caballeros and all the 80s heroes as well, Lester Kasai, Pat Noho, the list goes on and on and on. But to have the opportunity to skate with them.
Was that from a Bolorama?
That's me and Johnny Gray. Yeah,
I love that photo.
I love that photo too. Johnny Gray and I, we just, a lot of people, heaped shit on Bolorama and the comps and that sort of stuff. But they really were. They gave skaters in Sydney the opportunity to come down to a local bowl and see the cream of the world's best skaters, in current generation as well as past legends, skate at Bondi, and there was all sorts of nitpicking about who got in within the boundaries on the comp day or what have you. But if people were really interested, you could go there for the entire fortnight before the comp at 5 in the afternoon or after work and watch all these pros practicing. They were the magic sessions. Bondi, in the weeks leading up to the comp.
Ty Coling as well.
Yeah, Ty Coling would have been there ripping as well. You got it. That's right.
He was.
Oh, yeah, all the local rippers, and Keegan Palmer was there as an 11-year-old just totally shredding it,
Yeah.
Getting back to Bondi Bowl, I skated with Keegan one time. It was a lonely weekday that I had off work. Keegan was practicing for some contest somewhere or other, whatever, but he was about 11 or 12. It was a really onshore windy day, the day you just don't want to go skateboarding, but I had the day off, so I made the most of it. And Keegan was doing 4-foot-high frontside ollies in this hounding wind, and I just knew then this guy was special because he's a metre high in the air on an ollie, and you could see the wind just trying to push the board away from him. He's just adjusting his feet to bring it back in, and I just thought, man, how do you do that?
Definitely got it.
He would have been a total of 7 kilos or something.
That's right.
Like easily
exactly
wind
right.
affected.
Yeah,
Tiny.
you could really see that he had extraordinary ability and control at a young age. So
yeah. Because just watching the Olympics with Kieran Woolley as well. I mean, close to my heart because he's from Wollongong, which is South Coast. And watch those guys skate, and they do there's a certain X factor about them. There's a lot of really good skateboarders out there, but like you said, in situations like that, you can just see that 1-2% difference.
That's right.
Adjusting your feet midair on a windy day. That's the kind of stuff Kieran does.
With Kieran from a real early stage, I remember seeing him I was most impressed by him at Bar Beach at one of the Australian bowl riding comps up there when he was a really little tacker. The thing that Kieran had going, which goes back to that surf skate style, was the ability to really flow and just put in loads of tricks. And he had consistency down like a pro from a little kid, and that'll get you somewhere in the world of competitions. Consistency like that. I know, sadly, he sort of fell on the last trick in the recent Olympics, but he's got it. You look at any of Kieran's clips from the parks that he's skated around the world, and you can just see his ability and imagination. The lines that he draws are amazing. The combinations of tricks that he does in awkward and unusual places is just mind-blowing.
It's exciting. It's engaging.
Totally. His free skating is definitely really enjoyable to watch.
Exactly.
He just does stuff.
That's right.
It's cool.
Maybe that's why Belko Bowl Jam really is something he's always been a standout at.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But I think definitely he's the flowing style for that. But just obviously Belko is limited in lines, and so just watching him at weird parks and putting stuff together is really cool. Seeing all that, definitely
special,
really impressive. Yeah,
pretty special. I love this photo at John Gray's vert ramp.
Yeah, that's really special to my heart. That one.
Can I ask how old do you think you were there, roughly?
Oh, that's March of this year.
That's
so I was 63 years of age.
63.
Yeah. So good. Tail tapping on a vert
Have you been
ramp.
getting the pads out, Ty, and skating vert lately?
Not recently, but it is in my not too distant future.
Because there's just no exceptions for you.
That's right. Come on, Ty. Come out to Windsor
Zero
one of these Sundays.
excuses.
Me and Johnny Gray and Scott Spring are sessioning out there as many Sundays as we can when it's dry.
Yeah.
And we would welcome more crew, Ty. Just only having 3 skaters, you get pretty damn buggered.
Yeah,
Dude,
no
I'm
doubt.
going to buy some. I'm going to pad up again. I was saying to Ty, like, I can drop in on a vert ramp and I've got a rock to fakey in me. So
that's it. Do it.
I need to get some motivation, Ty. You need to take on.
Come and get involved.
Sunday beer and
Get
barbecue.
some rector knee pads.
Maybe
That's
not
it.
some rectors.
Do they even exist anymore?
No, thankfully.
That's right. Yeah,
Listen-
that's really special being, Johnny actually having one of your closest skating mates having a ramp in their backyard. And Johnny just shakes his head. He says every morning when he walks out there, it's just this big structure. It's blue. It's blue in honour of Manly Skate City. And it's just magic, to have those just quiet sessions. There's no scooter kids. There's no parents that try to go. You go skate any of the fantastic parks that are around Sydney now on a weekend, and it's just whoa. It's full on. The amount of skaters, the amount of scooters.
Yeah.
Meadowbank's just like peak hour traffic on a Sunday nowadays. That's one of my favourite parks close to where I live. And
I know we're going to play that.
but yeah, just you hit it up on a weekend. You got to have a crew with you, otherwise you're battling 8 kids in the bowl on their scooters and or sliding down on their butts with their parents standing up around the top having a picnic. It's quite the effort to get a roll in,
Well, let's take the opportunity to say that if you're a parent, that skate parks require active supervision.
Yes.
You need to be. You do like
They
I
do.
see 2-year-olds on those little scooters or 3-year-olds just.
Yeah.
It can be not enjoyable.
It can be a recipe for
and it's for their
disaster.
safety too, though, right?
It's
like
for their safety.
realistically, people are going faster to skate parks, so
That's right.
it's you're putting your child at risk just letting them roam free in that circumstance. All good to have a timely go in there, but just to let them roam free, where's your parental responsibility?
It's not set and forget like other playgrounds.
Yeah.
No. And it's
Get off your phone.
Yeah, get off your phone and just keep an eye. But also it's ironic that there's this there's a new emergence of more DIY spots. And I think it's precisely for the reason you're saying is that because, it is a bit of a place of solitude and where you don't have to battle for, and be just aware of not getting, wiped out by a kid on a scooter or someone who's just learning. So So there's a place for it. But I want to get up fast forwarding, I want to get up this, maybe one of the last clips of you skating Meadowbank recently. And it's just really inspiring because I think it was in 2019, if I can get that down. And the computer's not working. There we go. And I just want you to talk us through this line of you at Meadowbank. So,
yes.
Have you seen this clip? So,
no, that one is a front side air. Gladly tuck kneed.
Good work. Mulhall
Still
would
in
approve.
it. That's right. Rock and slide. Tricks back to back. That's what I always prided myself on. Tail slide. Yeah. A little bit of a grind there. Hands in a Kiwi slide. It cuts off.
So looking at that, comparatively, like that bowl is near perfect with granite coping.
Yeah, just beautiful.
Did you ever think in your lifetime you'd get to skate something like that?
I don't know. No. Never thought, never imagined it. And it's just amazing. It's wonderful to have it. It's a half an hour down the road from where I live, and it's a perfect bowl. I think Wedge and I were just talking just before the Chaos Jam we spoke of earlier on a couple of weeks ago. I skated with the Melbourne guys, came up and had a session at Meadowbank with us, and Wedge he reminded me of a conversation we'd had back when we were 18-year-olds at Pymble Pool. And he remembers me actually saying, just imagine if it would be possible for us to still be skating at the age of 40, we'd probably be riddled with arthritis and or with walking sticks, and that was an 18-year-old talking, about being a 40-year-old. But yeah, as you've just pointed out, that clip.
How old were you in that clip?
That clip was like 59.
You're 59.
Just before I was 60. And so Wedge was talking about exactly that, the reality that has actually eventuated was beyond our wildest dreams, and even in so many ways, the status of skateboarding today, the point it's at, is beyond our wildest dreams as 15, 16, 18-year-olds, to have the amount of parks that exist around the country, the variety of terrain, the quality of it, and to be in the Olympics, not that that's the be all and end all or any measurement standard, skateboarding being in the Olympics, but just the fact that it is there as a an iconic sort of sport that the world can now kind of embrace and recognise.
Did you ever talk about that, speculate about it, say what if? Like back when you were teenagers?
Not when we were teenagers, no.
Never
that
even
sort of
thought?
No, didn't even enter our heads that it would ever become an Olympic sport. I think it's before the Olympics started opening up their minds to things like snowboarding and that sort of stuff. The first I ever heard of it was when people were talking, the 90s generation might have started talking about skateboarding maybe one day being in the Olympics, so. But
well, it had that demonstration sport deal in the 96 Atlanta Olympics. Had that X ramp.
Right. That's right.
Danny was there and a few others.
Okay, yes, yeah. So yeah, the talk goes back to then, doesn't it? Yeah. So
yeah.
But that's the beauty of skateboarding. It can be a peak mainstream recognised sport now, but it can also be someone's lifestyle. It can be someone's self-expression. Some people call it an art form. Skateboarding, that's the beauty of skateboarding to me. It can be whatever the individual chooses it to be and wants to put into it, how they fit it into their lives. Skateboarding, people are sort of saying skateboarding doesn't belong in the Olympics or what have you, but I don't necessarily agree. It's sort of, I like the saying that the Olympics needs skateboarding more than skateboarding needs the Olympics. There's a truth to that, I think. But competitiveness has existed in skateboarding right back to day one, to the 60s. You look at clips of American competitions from 1966 and same in skateboarding in Australia in the 60s with David Hill becoming a champion competitive skater. And then you had, the competitive era in the mid-70s here too. There's always been competition skating, but then, perhaps the Dogtown skaters, perhaps they began that lifestyle. I don't know, that they introduced that ethos of it's not so much the competitions, it's how you do it, it's how you treat the terrain, the pools, the banks that you're seeking out, the stuff that's not made for skateboarding, the stuff that's natural terrain. And, you can make a go of that and push it hard there as much as you like and get your joy and find your passion in that. And so I've had the good luck to be able to do both. You know, I've spent my younger years searching out pools and bank spots with my brother and what have you, and looked at and tried to get down as low as I can in my Bertelmans and pull my 540 slides off at Greenwich Boat Ramp as fast and hard as I could, you know, and then get air, you know, what have you, back in the early Pimble pool days. But I've also enjoyed competitions too, you know, so that's why I love the bowler armour comps. Yeah. Johnny Gray and I would sort of prepare for them for a week or two before, you know, and then arrange to stay in hotels just down the road from Bondi, you know, and just be laughing the whole time, you know. We were skating there in those heats with our friends and our mates. Just gold, yeah.
The interesting thing about, like, to go back to what you just said, like the Dogtown guys and that showing that other side.
Yeah.
But they still competed as well, you know. So it wasn't just
That's right.
we're hardcore and doing this.
Yeah.
They also got into the competitive side. And so, like you say, and I've had this discussion a lot of times, it has that competitive side. And a lot of, you know, I think you got to accept that the progression came a lot from competitions, and, you know, and the progression is, as I've said before, what's kept me hooked and interested in it. You know, I still get stoked on seeing skating now. I'm not jaded or bored with it, you know, nearly 40 years later myself, you know, of doing it. It's still exciting to watch. And a lot of that, you'd have to say, comes from a competitive standpoint, basically.
Yeah.
You know, not strictly by any means, but definitely. But on saying that, pretty much strictly speaking, by personally competitive. I want to do that. You know what I mean? Not in a formal competition.
That's right.
Sort of set up. I think we have that basically ingrained in us as human beings, some sort of competitive nature. You know, you could say the stay alive sort of you know form of nature, and part of that's, you know, part of that is sort of competition, but that's how we've evolved. It can be friendly competition.
That's right.
You know, and just be like, and that has been commented on in the Olympics, and we've talked about it before. They're all supporting each other in the skating, and many people say, man, it's the only sport, like you see them, they're all like, you know, you saw Arissa go, come on, Haley, you know, and everyone's hugging each other and everyone's like super stoked, and it looks legitimate, you know, it comes across as legitimate. And I think that's a awesome thing, that the two worlds can coalesce and coexist.
That's rad.
Right
I agree, mate. Yeah, totally.
They're not, it doesn't have to be you're that and you're this, like it can be so many things.
Precisely.
Like the lifestyle and artistic. And
that's right.
There's so much.
Exactly.
There's so much depth to it. It's so non-delineated, undefined. It can be anything that you make of it.
That's right. Oh, absolutely. You see skaters, the Grant Taylors, the Chris Russells of the world. You know, they're not necessarily big comp skaters, but they're groundbreaking skaters. You know, so inspiring in lots of many other ways.
Yeah,
and you know but they're sort of like outside, removed from the world of competition to a degree.
But they still have so much reverence.
Absolutely,
from people.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Definitely.
They're like gods. You know, they're up there amongst, you know, the people are looking up to in terms of skateboarding. Absolutely,
definitely. So speaking of it being an art form as well, we have obviously skateboard graphics have been artistic forever.
Sure.
And incorporated so many different forms of art on them, stylized art. What have we got on the table here? Speaking of art, I bought
two relics, or two little significant things here for me. I guess this one. Should I hold it up?
Yeah,
Shannon,
man.
Yeah,
go for it.
It may look like a mini Mark Richards surfboard, but that's a fiberglass flex board. And I was awarded the very first competition I ever went in at St Ives Shopping Centre in January 1976. I came runner-up. I was second in the senior freestyle, and that was the prize.
Wow.
And it's got on the back there, and I'm not sure the camera will ever be able to read it, but it's made by Bent.
Yeah.
Bent, Post Office Box, Palm Beach. New South Wales 2108. Now, there might have been a surfboard manufacturer or not, or what, I'm not sure, but I've kept that over the years because it's just always just blew me away. I set it up, I drilled it and set it up.
Did you actually skate it though?
I did ride it once or twice at home, but as I said earlier, I'd never really liked flex decks.
Right.
It's got a couple of scratches just from being mishandled at home, but that's that one.
Amazing.
That was
it really is shaped like a single fin. Like that's like a single fin surfboard shape with
that's
the
right.
narrow tail, pin tail.
Absolutely. You can imagine a Chihuahua riding that at Pipeline.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah.
It's actually quite heavy.
Yeah, the old fiberglass boards were. That's right, yeah.
So that's somewhat, relatively speaking, artwork being prolific on skateboards,
That's
I
right,
guess.
yeah.
I mean, it was stylized with the colours.
That's right,
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
But so what's this graphic
This one
we have
This
here?
one is, I bought this one along, not so much for the graphic, but just it's actually got a plaque on it. But
I noticed.
it's that was a real surprise to me at the 2014
Can you hold up? Yeah, hold
2014
That's
Australian Bowl Riding Championships.
There you go.
All of a sudden, Pat Noho announced over the thing that they were going to be presenting an award for it was the Spirit of Jay Adams Award.
No way.
For the skater who best demonstrates the spirit of Jay through raw, aggressive and expressive skateboarding. And he awarded it to me, and it was a bit of a mind-blowing moment.
Pat Noho,
who is a second-generation Dogtown Z skater who I'd skated with every year. He was here for Bowlerama. Just to have that nod from Pat.
it's amazing, dude.
It blew me away. Yeah, so it's sort of one of Jay Adams' the last boards that I think that came out before he tragically passed away. Yeah. So
Tattoo.
yeah.
So do you know who did the artwork?
I don't know who did the artwork, but yeah, it's that's a keepsake, that one for sure. Just because back, I think initially I might have been inspired by the early freestyle, competitive freestyle skaters, like Shane Aran and the Coke team, and then Russ Howell and Stacey Peralta. But then as soon as the skateboarder mags hit the stands and we discovered the Dogtowners, it was all Jay Adams and Tony Alva and Stacey Peralta and the other skaters across the spectrum across the USA as well. But I think I've spoken about this with people of my generation. The Dogtown scene was so regarded. Everyone from Ian Mackay and Henry Rollins, right across the popular culture, will say the Dogtown articles in Skateboarder influenced them the most. Yeah. And the same thing happened here in Australia. It's kind of like every little scene in the world, I think, in skateboarding in 1977 thought that they had their own Dogtowns. They were the closest thing to Dogtown out of Venice, California. So I've met skaters from all around the world who kind of will tell you that, oh yeah, we were mimicking those guys and we thought we were just like them and what have you. And yeah, I think their style, and skating at Greenwich Boat Ramp in those early 70s days with John Tesoriero and Gary Bird. And John Tesoriero actually was good friends with Stacey Peralta. John's older brother, was instrumental in bringing Russ Howell and Stacey Peralta out to Australia. And Stacey left John with one of his early Zephyr boards. And John was his style was, and his ability at the boat ramp was just so fast, hard and smooth. It just sort of had Dogtown written across it all the way. And as soon as my brother and I sort of started skating the boat ramp and seeing John and Gary Bird skate there, we were mimicking that same hard, fast, get down as low as you can to the wall sort of sliding style. And so I used to actually, that photo, the early photo we had up of the boat ramp of me doing that aerial Burt type slide thing on a little red board, that was a homemade board where I'd painted the graphics on it, a copy of a red and white Z-Flex board. So I was making my own Z-Flex boards copies in 1977, and then to be awarded this sort of thing by Pat Noho, a second generation Z skater, all those years later when I was 54 years of age, was a bit of a big one. So
full circle kind of.
Full circle, exactly.
Which is pretty cool, that sort of acknowledgement.
It was, awesome. Yeah. I don't know whether I would have described my own skating as being aggressive. I was always more of smooth, controlled skater. I suppose you could say there's a bit of aggro in some of the technical edge tricks and stuff that I might do occasionally, but smooth and trying to keep it as flowing and as feeling as good as possible when I'm riding. That's what I've always aimed for.
Yeah, dude. Very cool. I think any form of skateboarding, like kind of hard skating, difficult skating, there's elements of aggression in it anyway.
Yeah.
Like realistically, you need to put it out there.
I did just recently, actually, in April of this year, skated that pool that I told you about, Ty, a deep pool, probably about a 10-foot deep pool, probably one of the best pools I've skated in Australia. And to master a pool again at my age was quite a big thing. It was quite a complicated pool to skate. It had a strange trough-like transition at the bottom. It had a good amount of transition, but just it was the way it was designed was kind of made it complicated. And there was also a bend in the wall, and that took some aggression.
Yeah,
as a 63-year-old, to get anywhere near the tiles in that pool, you can't just be taking it easy.
So sick.
So inspiring.
It really is.
It was fun. It was hella fun, that pool. Came away with a bit of a torn meniscus in my right knee, but that was 12 or so weeks ago. It's healed. I've had one skate back on my board since then, and we're back at it as soon as I can. Next opportunity.
That's amazing. Like, as just another one to keep on going. Because I've got a little something going on at the moment, and it's getting better. But it's like, man, how many of these things can you just keep taking? But obviously, it's like it's sort of as long as it sort of comes back, and you like that drive can still be there, right? And it is inspiring to
mate.
See you and Johnny. And obviously many others, holding that torch and making it happen and showing that it can be done. Because obviously the older people, obviously you were a bit older than us growing up, and older than Tony and those guys, you know what I mean? But realistically, the generation gap has widened so massively, but it was pretty close then. Like I've said in previous ones, guys 5 years older were like older.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and now it's like massive. And I remember at our skate riders comps, and you and Johnny would come down, and you would have been in your 50s then. And I was like, wow, there's like 4-year-olds here skating, like Jackson Danini, I think, and then a 54-year-old, like proper 50-year gap, and it's still kind of still widening, and people are still doing it, and
what other activity does that?
Yeah, not many, if
any.
And particularly to all come together in the one scenario like that, and just be like like loving it.
Sir.
Totally.
The stoke is there, and like on the back of what you just said about the Olympics, man. For skaters, it's just another reason to get together and have a session, even though there is competition, right?
That's right.
I love that you said that.
To add to that, like Andy Mack and old mate from South Africa too. Like, sure, he wasn't at Andy Mack, but Andy Mack smashed it there. Like, realistically, I was like, wow, that's pretty also inspiring at 51 to be able to whack out decent tricks.
Absolutely.
Still, and put whole lines together was really like, wow.
Oh, yeah, big Japan air across that hip, and the whole lines he was putting together. And you can just see the joy on his face, you know.
He was pumped.
He was just having such a fun time. You know, obviously he was probably stoked, you know, as a skater and sports person to have made it to that point. But along with it all, you know, you could just see he was just having a blast. You know, he was having time of his life. Shouting out to his kids at home and the rest of it when the camera swung around to him, and it's like, here's Dad at the Olympics. You know, can you believe it? Can I believe it? You know, I'm sure that's what he was thinking. But it's it is. It's it's the same thing's happening with surfing too. You know, it's been a recent phenomenon in sports, in world sports, to see how far people can do it at a top competitive level. You know, Kelly Slater being the obvious example. You know, and I think that skateboarding with Tony Hawk and any of the other skaters who are still skating, you know, well into their 50s and 60s. And Alva himself is, I think Tony Alva, he was born in 57. Oh, he's 3 years older than me, and he's still skating, you know, he's still skating regularly within his limits. You know, as you get older, you know, your bag of tricks sort of diminishes a little bit, but you stick with what you know and with what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And you can still have a blast, you know, and Scotty Spring and John Gray and I talk about this a lot. You know, it's kind of like out at Windsor when we're skating on Sundays, you're relearning your old tricks a lot of the time. You know, you think, you challenge yourself. You know, Johnny wants to get an egg plan in before his next birthday. You know, I want to get a frontside invert back.
Wow, that's
you know,
sick.
It's sort of, but you can do these things if you're fit enough and you work at it. You know, as long as you know. These are things that you might have done in the past. So your muscle memory, if you've got the ability, the flexibility, and the strength to put yourself in the position, you can actually feel that, I can do that. I could bring that down, you know. But it's if you're unfit, you're not going to be able to get yourself in that position in the first point. But it depends on how much you want to do it. You know, you might be a 50 or 60-year-old skater who just wants to go and carve and grind, and that's fun too. You know, of course. My first session back after this meniscus 12 weeks ago was only at Meadowbank 10 days ago or so, and I only did calves and grinds, and just totally had a blast. Actually, I lie, I did a frontside air or two. In the end, I couldn't hold myself back.
Excellent.
But it's all fun. It's all relative, you know. If you want to, and these parks we have, they're not harsh Pimble pools or Greenwich boat ramps. They're beautiful transition bowls and flow parks. Yeah, flow parks that are with gentle curves and what have you. And if you're lucky enough to get there midweek, when there's not 100 scooters and 50 kids in the bowl, you know, you can get yourself some nice lines and have a blast.
Yes,
it's magic.
Yes, sir. Yeah, what's next for you, AJ? You know,
what's next?
Well, actually, let me rephrase the question. Yeah, like where are you at now in life? Not just with skateboarding, but in general, you know? Like what's the plans for the next chapter?
Next chapter? To keep skateboarding, keep playing music, spend more time. I'm semi-retired these days. Spend more time with the family. My son has a 2-year-old daughter. I've been heading over there once a week to hang out with my granddaughter, and that's just a blast, you know, to spend quality time with family. My mum is 87 and she's a bit crook. I go down and spend time with her, looking after her. But my partner and I, Kathy, we talk about wanting to do some travel together in the future. So that's a plan. Sort of, it's a vague plan at the moment. She's about to do some travel on her own. I've got some stuff to do at home. But we'll work it together soon in the near future. But yeah, no, I aim to keep skating as my main sort of fitness activity, as well as you know, something that I've loved and have a passion for 50 years now. So I aim to do that as long as I can, as long as it's practical, and as long as I can, I'll keep doing it. You have to work at it a bit, you know. I do cycle a bit to keep my aerobic fitness and legs a bit. Leg strength going.
Do you surf still? Did I ask you that already?
Surf,
Do you get in the water?
I still have a couple of boards, but I don't surf all that regularly these days. The spare time that I've got, I dedicate to skating and family.
Skating and family.
And a bit of music here and there, yeah. So
skating, family and music.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah. Yep.
Still going to go to some Looper J shows?
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Definitely, yeah. She's next gig up in Sydney. I've travelled down to a few gigs in Melbourne to see her down there too. Yeah,
awesome.
So
let's go to her next Sydney one time.
Yeah,
let's.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. I'll let you know. She does a bit of DJing too.
Awesome.
Comes up and DJs a few Sydney parties occasionally as well too. So
does she DJ under Looper J as well? Or?
Yeah, she does. Yeah,
cool.
So yeah,
awesome.
I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, do please do for sure.
So good. I don't know. It's like I feel like there's such a deep box to unpack with you. I mean, it's time to wrap it up a little bit. But is there anything else? Is there something we've missed, Ty, AJ? Are we feeling pretty good about this? Because I don't know. Yeah. I just you're a gem, AJ.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful to have you on the show. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah,
but
fun.
Yeah. Is there anything else for us? You think it'll come?
Oh, I can't really think of anything, to be honest, right now. Other than
anything you want to say?
I have one question.
Sure, okay, Ty, you totally.
All good.
It's pretty whatever, but flyaway helmets.
Okay.
Right.
Do they actually work?
Yeah. I've had a few head bumps. I'm still standing.
Indeed, definitely.
But I do admit to one time at West Melton halfpipe, coming off a rock and slide there and hanging up somehow or slamming and going down face first, and the helmet being knocked up because they have a peak on them going up, and so I get massive graze right across above my eyebrow and on my forehead.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Helmet damage.
So, but that hit the back of your head and you're all right. So,
that's
were they just a skate helmet?
Yes.
Or was it just a skate helmet?
They were initially called the J. Adams Flyaway. It was a J. Adams design,
right? Put
out by Kanoa. Kanoa Surf was Val Surf was a surf shop at the back of Skateboard magazine. And Kanoa Surf, they were mail order surf shops. I think they might have had premises shops in California itself, LA itself, but Kanoa Surf put out the J. Adams Flyaway helmet.
Yeah, right.
Back in goodness knows when that was, 1970, 78 or something, 79. But yeah.
Magic.
No.
Do they still exist? Is it still a thing?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't. Whoever owns them and makes them in California now, they're kind of like a custom made type thing. I think he does make a few. If you go to SoCal Skate Shop in LA, they sell them behind the counter, but you can get them custom made too. Well too. They're pretty expensive. They cost you a couple of $100.
Yeah, right.
So, but you get all those pretty colours. So
Yeah, sure, definitely.
I got mine from Pat Noho.
Oh,
my coloured one, and my orange and yellow and green one. Yeah, it was
amazing.
One of his old ones. Yeah, so
that's awesome.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. All right, let's leave it there, Mr. Adrian Errol Jones. Thanks for being on the show.